Hello, everybody. The time has finally arrived for us to discuss the top 12 albums of 2022.
Yes, here we are once again, two complete strangers.
Yes, pretty much.
With various... we both circle the drain of audio. I'm a sound designer. He's Patrick. And
oh, gosh, what a great start to this. It is true, though. The Stranger thing always makes me laugh every year because the only conversations or the only connection we have is basically just like yelling at each other through texts about how great certain albums are and stuff. And then we usually stop that about halfway through the year because I kind of don't want you to know what I'm listening to because I want it to be a surprise. Fair, yeah. But then at the end of the year, we're always like, should we discuss a little bit more? Should we trade notes? Because I definitely know on my list this year, there are albums that, well, not even necessarily on my list of my top 12, but I know for a fact that there are albums this year that I heard that had you heard them as well, I'm fairly certain they would have ended up on your list. So
I'm interested in that.
We'll see if
I'm wondering if I might have some of the same. I have a couple of things that it's like I've been wanting to send your way, but it's like, no, I must wait for the countdown.
I know. It's always fun. It's always fun. I will say that we discussed this just a few days ago, and you had said that you think that we might have two albums that are the same on our list.
I do think it's more than possibly. That now.
But I also think that there is a chance we could have five this year.
I was wondering if it would be five. I don't know why I thought that, but just now I was like,
I don't think it's going to be five. I don't even know if it's going to be two, to be honest, because my list is shocking.
I know it's at least one, for sure.
I think so. Yes, but it's questionable because you say that and I almost think, well, which of the two that I thought we were talking about, which of those two do you think? But I think we would really surprise each other if both of those albums I don't think were on our list. For sure the one, but enough being vague. Right. So one thing that I want to say right away off the bat, apart from thank you very much for watching, and if you've watched our videos like this in the past, thank you very much for being brave enough to come back and attempt to watch another year.
What a trooper you are.
One thing I want to say right off the bat is that I have been having a bit of rough luck recently, and I've been really looking forward to this, so I'm so happy we're finally doing this. But last week, I actually tore my left bicep while working on the farm that my family lives on, and I've been planning this whole time to wear my sling that I got from the hospital that I'm supposed to wear, but I don't necessarily have to. I've been planning on wearing that for this video. However, the point of my elbow kind of hurts, and so I'm not going to do that. But I just wanted to show off to everybody I
was wondering if that's what that was.
My arm. It's tough to see here in my awesome camera, but the bruise starts like over here and goes all the way up to here and all the way down.
Yeah.
And so normally when I talk about music, I'm going like this all the time. And so like I probably this time I'm just going to be going like this most of the time. So, just bear with me. We'll see what happens. I do have my sling handy if for some reason my arm would start to hurt, but as long as I don't like move it around a ton, I can sit like this comfortably. I can sit down here like this comfortably. So awesome. One other thing I got to say, Chris, last year, I don't remember if we did it on camera or not, but last year we talked about how awesome the quality of your video was, specifically compared to mine.
Yeah.
And you are what inspired me to do all my research into looking for webcams and to buy the camera that I'm currently using.
Oh, wonderful.
Right now. And so all year on my channel, if anybody's watching this that's been watching any other videos on my channel, any of my reactions, since I did my Rack Shack video for Bloodywood, which was the very first video I did on my channel with this camera, I had the settings all messed up. I had no clue what I was doing at all in that video. Ever since then, every video I filmed, which has been many more than I've actually released because I have so many in my back catalog to edit and release. But everything's been filmed in this video. So, Chris, I just want to say thank you for inspiring me to look into webcams and not like I thought that in order for my videos to look decent on YouTube, I had to buy some sort of like a SLR or a DSLR camera that costs like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And instead,
that was true in like 2007, but
maybe
the future comes.
And so I bought this $13.50 Aukey webcam, and that's what I've been using. So thank you for inspiring me to do that.
Sure, yeah. And it's actually really interesting. I've been using this camera for the last month or so to keep an eye on my 3D printer. And I wish I could use Zoom to do it, because Zoom really brings out the quality of this camera a lot. If I just bring up the camera in Windows, it's like
it looks terrible, right? I know. It's so funny. Some of the people I work for, we've been using Google Meet recently, and I was like, "Ooh, Google Meet! Never tried this before." Loaded in with my camera, and like it looked pretty awesome. So like, shout out to Google Meet, but shout out to Zoom for being reliable as well. We'll see what happens this year. Let me see. Is there anything else that I wanted to discuss that has nothing to do with the top 12? I don't think so. I got my beverage as always. I've got a bottle of water on standby too.
What flavor of Mountain Dew do we have this year?
This year we have I'm going with the classic. I'm going with my favorite, just regular Voltage.
Oh, sure.
I do have some of this year's Voodoo Mountain Dew, which is what I drank last year for our video. But this year's Voodoo Mountain Dew does not taste as good as last year's Voodoo Mountain Dew. Not even close.
And it's supposed to be the same?
No, Voodoo is it's a mystery flavor. So that just means that they take all of the combined flavors that they've used throughout the year and they make a mystery flavor out of it. So
they mix them all together into one.
Yeah, that's really how they do it. So it's not a specific flavor. Like there's no, but Voltage is always my favorite. Cheers to everybody.
I mean, shout out to them, I guess, for continuing to try to do new things.
Every quarter.
Very cool.
Right now they have a disgusting one that is fruitcake. Oh, I didn't think of that, but I should have brought that. Tell you what, we'll do that when we record part 2 of this video, because that's another thing we should mention. We decided this year we're going to intentionally record 2 parts so we don't tire ourselves out and we aren't super loopy at the end, which is always fun to be loopy at the end, but I feel like we make things drag on a little more than we need to.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah, for sure. And so we're gonna do 2 parts spread out over multiple days, and so next time I will take one of the disgusting fruitcake Mountain Dews and drink that for your viewing pleasure.
I look forward to that. I love watching people eat nasty for some reason.
And it is so bad.
Well, it's so funny because fruitcake has been it is one of the joke foods, notoriously bad. And my grandpa is the only person I've ever known that liked a fruitcake.
I've never tried a real
fruitcake. He's dead
fruitcake.
now, so there you go.
That's probably why all the fruitcake.
Yep, fruitcake, absolutely.
Okay, so let's get started. Before we get into our list, we wanted to talk about a couple things. And first thing I wanted to bring up to you, Chris, is we have talked. The one thing I feel like has been consistent over the course of this year when we've been talking to each other a little bit is how fantastic this year has been. So I want to just talk about that a little bit, the year overall, sort of looking at it as a retrospective. So how do you feel this year has been?
Well, as touched on last year, ever since I started doing sound design full time, my availability for listening to music throughout the day is significantly diminished to, compared to how it was before that.
Right. You can't work on audio and listen to audio at the same time. It doesn't work.
Right. I do a lot of listening to game music soundtracks and stuff, things that are very, easy to keep behind everything else, but actively listening to regular music is not something I get to do every day, all day long anymore. And despite all of that, I have the largest list of albums to choose from since we started doing this. I landed at 40.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think, now last year, if people have watched last year, they'll remember that you were disappointed with how YouTube Music was changing or doing something, and that had been your primary way of listening to music. And we had discussed at the time you using Spotify more. Did you use Spotify more this year? And then that leads me to my second question is, if you did use Spotify more, did you get your Spotify Wrapped? And then what was that all about?
I was actually I forgot I was going to grab some screens and info from that and bring it up, but I did switch to Spotify this year.
Okay.
And I did specifically separate it from YouTube Music because YouTube Music is all day game music, whatever I do for working. And it really screws up, not in a way that sucks for me, but a way that sucks for the top 12, the recommendations and stuff and the Wrapped and everything else I get. So I'm real music on Spotify, work music on YTM, and that helped keep things separate. And as a result of that, I mean, I did my best. It wasn't perfect at keeping them separate, but
that's all
Spotify,
right,
I had some really impressive, I guess interesting more so information from my Spotify Wrapped. I was in the top, man, I wish I could remember the numbers, but the Annex, one of the albums on my list, was my most listened to album of the year, which I think is completely bananas. It's like, yeah, I mean, it did come out in February, so it does have time on its side, but I looked at it, I was like, how did this, like...
Well, that probably just means you listen to like a wide variety of things like I do every year. Because my number one most listened to thing is also actually my number 2 album of the year. And it showed like how many hours or whatever, how many times I'd listened to it. And it was like 12. Like I listened to like the first song on that album 12 times, which for being my number 2 album of the year, I know I've listened to it out of context of Spotify because I actually have that one on CD. So like I've listened to that one on CD way more times than I listened to it on Spotify, but I listened to it on Spotify many times before I purchased this CD. So that's always interesting. Do you want to find some of your numbers? Because I have some of my numbers, and I wanted to go over those a little bit. So I'll go over my numbers if you want to look for yours.
I will say something in the process of trying to pull my numbers up now. You
can only do it on a tablet, right?
Oh,
you can only look at your Wrapped on a tablet or on a mobile device.
I don't think that. Yeah, you actually are. I think you're right about that. But so there's a playlist it made me of my top songs for the year.
Okay.
And I think they might be in order, but that's TBD.
Okay.
But
yeah, don't say anything out loud accidentally because I don't want to know your list until we're ready.
No, yeah, but I will say to go into, I don't know, this doesn't really have a place in
That's right.
any of the notes.
Go into whatever you want.
I really wanted to get that Convey album this year.
Me too. And because they haven't said any information at all about it, have they? Yeah.
That Viribus song, despite being 2 minutes, is like that. This will be album of the year the minute I get my hands on it. I can almost tell already. And I was really hoping for it. According to this list of my top songs, it's the number 6 for songs that I've listened to. And like I said, I don't know if they're in order, but I don't know why they would put it in this format if it wasn't. Sure.
That was something we talked about as getting excited for this year at the end of our last video. So there were several things like for the last like 5 months, I've been really excited because I knew In Flames was going to be releasing a new album. Well, that doesn't come out until February. So it didn't actually release this year, but all year long I was saying, wow, I can't believe we're going to have a year where we get new In Flames, new Demon Hunter, and new Soilwork all in the same year, because those are 3 of the 4 bands that got me into metal when I was in high school. And
sure.
And so to have 3 of those bands release an album in the same year was going to blow my mind. Instead, we got the Soilwork album, which is fantastic. We got the Demon Hunter album, which we'll talk about next time. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then the In Flames doesn't come out until next year. So it got pushed until February. I don't know if it was supposed to be, but it got pushed till February. So
and speaking of that, in that vein, Metallica dropped a new song.
Lux Aeterna, baby.
Yes. Have you listened to it?
Yeah, I've listened to it several times. I watched several reactors react to it, and I just watched it myself. I love it. I do.
Same.
I am not a big fan of Metallica. I don't know any of their songs that aren't either on the Black Album or weren't like a huge hit song. But you knew they had to come out with something after the crazy Master of Puppets thing that happened this year with Stranger Things. Like that was the song, right? Master of Puppets, I think.
I think so, yeah. I didn't see the Stranger Things thing, but
it's really good.
I was seeing it happen, like watching something related to it.
I know my cousin who has an original copy of that album on vinyl. It shot this year up to being his most it's now the vinyl he owns that's worth the most money, because I think like an original copy copy of Master of Puppets on vinyl is like $150 or something. So
wow, interesting. Okay.
He also has a copy of Kate Bush's Running Up the Hill on single. I'm like, dude, you are so lucky, because Kate Bush's Running Up the Hill to me was the song. It wasn't the song of the year, but like the music story of the year. First time in music history that we've had a song that's over 40 years old be on the top, like the number 1 position on the charts worldwide for like more than 3 weeks or something in a row. Insane.
How old is that song?
40 years. From the 80s, right? Kate Bush, 1982, I think, or 83.
Huh. Did it get remade?
No, it was just used in Stranger Things.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it was Chris, you need to watch Stranger Things. Like, music is a really important part of season 4. Like, they fight this evil thing and they like defeat the evil with music. And Kate Bush's Running Up the Hill is like iconic scene, and it's used multiple times, and they have like orchestral remixes of it and all this stuff. Yeah. There were three songs there were three songs they used in There were three songs they used in Stranger Things. Master of Puppets by Metallica, which so many people in reaction channels have been reacting to Metallica since that happened.
Which I love. I love watching people react to Metallica.
Yeah, for sure. I might even do some Metallica reactions on my channel because I've never heard any of their albums other than Black Album.
Nice.
Kate Bush's Running Up the Hill, and one of my maybe top 20 favorite songs of all time, Journey's Separate Ways, Worlds Apart, was also used for like the band Journey's Separate Ways, which is that someday love will find you.
Oh, sure.
Those chains that bind you, right?
I know that song, yeah. That's a good song.
Yeah, and the synth line, fantastic. But
it's about time a different Journey song became something people know about.
For sure. And I love that song. I've always loved that song. It's one of my favorite 80s songs. It's legit one of my favorite songs of all time. Doesn't fade out, which is great. Wait, maybe it does. No, it doesn't. I don't think so. Anyway, they have like an orchestral version of that in Stranger Things. They did all sorts of really cool stuff with music. But yeah, the Kate Bush thing, 40 years later, became number one for many, many, many weeks. And it broke all these records. And she's going on like a tour. I think she's going to release a new album, like complete revival of her career.
That's bananas. Because I remember
they put it.
Seeing something about, I saw like an interview with her about that song or something, and I read it and it was wild. And I was like, what? And I think I saw the date and I was really confused, and I didn't realize it was Stranger Things related at all. I knew the Metallica thing was, but I was like, and I had kind of heard it, and I was like, I feel like I recognized the song, and I was confused as to why it was so popular. Yeah, there was a lot of confusion involved in that for me, but it's crazy that show is really just driving so much like pop culture influence. It's crazy.
It is insane. And the Kate Bush thing too, I had heard something about it. Oh, that's right. It was just crazy to me that they were playing in, because 80s is now considered oldies. So like if you listen to the oldies radio station, you'll hear 80s music. And they're just getting into the 90s now as well. But like on top 40 radio, like here in Omaha, 98.5, Chris, you know, the like big top 40 radio station, they were playing Kate Bush's Running Up the Hill.
Crazy.
And I was just like, mind blown, like top 40 radio. It's so crazy. So what a crazy year. But apart from all that stuff, what a fantastic year for music. There is so much good music that was released this year across all genres. This year, for the first time, I contemplated putting a video game soundtrack in my top 12 of the year.
Ooh,
I've never thought about putting an instrumental album on the top of my list, or in my list at all, but I contemplated it this year. It didn't really make it that far in my contemplation, but I thought about it. And then I also, for the first time this year, contemplated, and was very close to putting a live album on my top 12.
Now that's the thing. That's a big deal.
Yeah, because I would never. But when you are such a fantastic artist, which it was Yanov, which it's not on my top 12 list, so I don't have a problem selling you. But like one of my favorite artists of all time, basically, released 2 albums this year, and one of them was sort of like a 45-minute, like very all slow ballads, which was really cool, and it was a nice album. Not on my list. Didn't even make it in my honorable mentions. But in my honorable mentions, which we will discuss in the next video, our honorable mentions for the year. What is their live album? It's I think it's like 55 minutes long. It's extended versions of like 15 of their songs. It is incredible. There's all sorts of crazy soloing and little noodling, and they have so much fun. And that is the purpose of live music. And on top of that, it sounds fantastic. There's background vocals. There's all sorts of things. It's fantastic. But I don't want to go on and on forever. So how did you feel about the year overall with all the stuff you're into?
It's really... I couldn't believe how many, like there's bands that have put out music for the first time in 10 years. There's bands that put out 3 albums at a time. Like, it's wild. There's a lot of it. It's very, very good.
It is. I will say for me, I do have my Spotify wrapped stuff pulled up, so I'm just going to mention that real quick here.
Same.
So I was really disappointed with the Spotify Wrapped this year. In previous years, they have given us way more like specific details.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
Oh, yes. Like in previous years, they would tell you like what percentage of a genre you've listened to. And they would also tell you like what your top 5 musical genres you listen to are and what percentage of your whole that you listen to were those genres. They would tell you the number of new bands you listen to this year. They would tell you all sorts of things that were really...
I mean, mine tells me the number of genres, sort of. It says I've explored 8 genres, and it tells me the top 5.
Oh, see, mine did not tell me that. Mine told me that I did listen, that like they did this weird thing with like badges or whatever this year where they like gave you these like symbols that told you like what kind of a music listener you were. And mine was like adventurous, like because I tried to like I listened to like a huge variety of things, which absolutely, of course I would, but I did write down 3 specific stats that I wanted to mention. So first thing is that it told me that I listened for 5. Okay, so I have 3 things that I wanted to mention. So the first thing from my Spotify Wrapped that I wanted to mention was that it told me that I listened for 5,812 minutes.
That's it?
5,812 minutes. Right, which isn't a ton. However, if you consider the fact that I listen to CDs a vast majority of the time,
Fair.
I actually think that this is the year that I listened to Spotify more than any year in the past. I also do listen to a lot of things on YouTube. Like I'll just go find the music video or whatever and watch that.
I see.
So sometimes I'll discover something new that way, though usually this year I did like 95% of my discovering new music through Spotify. You know, however I heard about an album, I would look it up on Spotify, or however I heard about a band or whatever that was cool, look it up on Spotify, see what they got, listen to the most recent thing. That's how I discovered new stuff. The far more interesting thing to me is that I listened to 652 different artists.
Woo.
I do think of those 650 artists or whatever number I mentioned, I would say probably close to, for sure, 550 or so were probably artists that I did not know who they were. I listened to so much stuff, it's insane. And so that was just going to be my main point of this discussion is just, at the beginning here is just like, I think this year was so fantastic. You know, we said before we even started recording that I think you have the most number of albums that you were contemplating this year. 'Cause
40.
Right, which is for you is crazy because in years past you have even said that it was a struggle to find 12 albums.
Mm-hmm,
you know, you obviously listened to more than that, but to find like 12 albums that deserve to be on your list was tough. But this year you had a huge amount.
So many.
So one thing that we do every year that I really enjoy doing before we get into our list is I like to read my list of albums that I feel are worth mentioning, but are not necessarily my honorable mentions.
Sure.
So I'm going to do that and read that real quick right now. I'm just going to like rapid fire read through these. So Chris, I want you to pay as much attention as you can, though I'm going to try to read through it as fast as possible, but obviously anybody watching, pay as much attention as you can. And if you notice that I say a band that you really like mention in the comments, let me know, like maybe I'll go back and check that album out. But basically my criteria for an album to make this list is that it has to be something that I listen to at least over halfway through, though in most cases with all these albums it'd be almost all the way through, if not all the way through. And it has to be something that was like impressive enough for me to like take notice and for me to go back to it now at the end of the year when I was getting ready for my list, because I had probably like 300 albums that I was looking through that I saved from throughout the year. Maybe less than 300, maybe around 200 I would say probably is a more realistic number. But these were albums that made it through that process. And then they were kind of shoved to the side, and I focused on my like 30 albums or so that I would say were in my like honorable mentions and my top 12. So of the CDs that I bought this year that I feel are albums that are worth mentioning are albums by the bands Imagine Dragons, Interpol, Toby Mac, Eels, Port Noir, and BT. Okay, That's it. Any other CD that I bought is either not worth mentioning or on my top 12 of the year, which is...
What about honorable mentions?
Or there's some in honorable mentions, for sure.
Okay, sure.
So now this is the way more interesting thing, in my opinion. These are digital albums that I discovered on Spotify, YouTube, wherever. And there's quite a few of these. So rapid fire. Try to make a note, Chris, if you hear any band specifically and you want to mention it or say anything about it and like write it down or something, because I'm not going to stop, okay?
Sure.
The Key of Groove, Set It Off, Man with Roses, From Fall to Spring, Foals, Tape 5, The Kooks, Plastic Picnic, The Halo Effect, Miseration, Spite, Early James, Yanov, Gioli and Asia, Outlining Color, The Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Freak Gen, Fight the Fade, The Midnight, Lunatica, The Annex, Smash into Pieces, Native Harrow, Arctic Monkeys, Devin Townsend, Pele Royale, Dragonette, Skin Shape, Simple Minds, Lorna Shore, Thrill Chaser, Daniel Rawson, The Horizon Forbidden West soundtrack, Dragged Under, Adrian Quesada, he released 2 albums this year, both fantastic. The Rex, Carpenter Brute, Maddie O'Neill, and you will know them by the Trail of the Dead, The Fright, Crosses, Detroit, Dead Sarah, Battle Beast, and Veers. So that's my list of albums to mention. Was there anything in there that stuck out to you?
One of them is my number 2.
I am so curious about that. We'll get there.
One of them is my number 10.
Oh, okay. So, that's interesting. Okay, so I am so happy with that list. Like, there's so many musical genres represented there. Like I said, this was my one mention of the Horizon Forbidden West soundtrack. That soundtrack to me, that game became my 3rd favorite game of all time this year. It's one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had playing a video game. I love it top to bottom, everything about it. And I think
What's number 2?
Huh?
Number 2 favorite game.
My number 2 is The Witcher 3.
Oh, okay. Number 1's Shadow of the Colossus.
No, number 1 is Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, all right.
It goes Red Dead Redemption 2, Witcher 3, Horizon Forbidden West, Red Dead Redemption 1, then Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then after that, I don't know what it would be.
Yeah, Red Dead makes sense.
I'm not that far. I think Red Dead Redemption 2 is like the greatest thing I've ever experienced. And this year I watched several people play through the game, and I didn't watch them play like all 150 hours that they played, but I did watch key moments, and I did watch several channels play through like the entire ending and the entire prologue, which is actually my favorite part of the game and my favorite part of any game I've ever played. And so yeah, whatever. We don't need to talk about Red Dead Redemption. That's in years past. But so that's an interesting list. I'm excited to see what made it onto your list that I just mentioned in the stuff I read. Do you have anything that you want to mention in this sort of just like worthwhile mentioning, but not part of your honorable mentions?
Yes. And some of them are the same as yours.
Okay.
So my list isn't as long, but Hyalung, The Who, not WHO, but HU, the Mongolian band.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Bloodywood, Infected Mushroom, Maddie O'Neill, Carpenter Brute, and Survive Said the Prophet.
Okay, that's a great list. Infected Mushroom released an album this year?
They did. I Am 25.
But that's really disappointing to me because I had no clue until right now. I feel like I just looked them up too like a couple months ago. You know, man, you got to stay on top of stuff. Holy crap.
You do. It's been out a little while too.
And I will say October was like an insane month. There was so much stuff released in October. And so much really terrible stuff too. So we'll get to that next time.
I can't wait. I always look forward to hearing about what's awful.
Okay, so I believe that's everything we were going to mention before we get into our list. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about the year overall or anything like that?
Just something interesting about all of the bands on my worth mentioning list.
Okay.
Most of them, I guess that's not entirely true. But no, yeah, that's true. Most of them are not American. Hyalung is Norse. I guess. I don't know. Scandinavian.
Are they I think I get them mixed up with the Who that you mentioned. One of them has that guy that does the Peruvian like throat singing or whatever, right?
That's Hyalung.
Okay.
Yep. And I saw them live in Portland, and it was one of the coolest concert experiences I've ever had.
That's
very good.
I bet it
so
was.
Cool. Oh, it was so cool. And then, the Who, Bloodywood. Bloodywood's album is great, and I'm really excited for that band.
We'll get to talk about that later.
For that band to exist out of where they're from and like who they are and all that. That's really wonderful. Infected Mushroom, Maddie O'Neill, you'll probably bring them up. Carpenter Brute, always one of my favorites. I consider him to be like the flagship of just like a really heavy synth wave.
Dude,
like
that
album does it the way he does
is so crazy. I listened to it so much for a while there, and I could not decide if there were any real guitars on the album or not. And I think I came on the side of like, I don't think there's any real guitars on this, but who cares? It's like listening to the old Twisted Metal soundtrack cranked up to like 14.
What a great comparison.
Oh, it is so good. That is such a good album.
I saw him live earlier this year at some point.
Does he perform with a band?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it a band or is it just a guy? I don't even know.
It is. Carpenter Brute is a guy basically, but he has a band live, and there were definitely guitars involved in that. And it was rad.
That's awesome. That's cool.
Yep. And Survive Said the Prophet is a Japanese band. Their lead singer recently got very popular by doing the new theme song for the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Ah, okay.
His name is Yosh, I guess. And their album was in contention for, I think, my top 12 spot against an album that eventually landed at my number 7 spot. But
okay, so I believe I'm going first. So we are going to be talking about my number 12. You're ready to move on to the list, right?
Yep.
Just make sure. Okay, my number 12 is Chasing Ghosts by the band Stabbing Westward.
Oh, sure. I didn't realize Stabbing Westward was still a band.
Well, this is their first album in 21 years.
Oh, I see. All right. So that's something that is happening on this year too, for sure.
Yes, it reminded me. I almost felt like when that Static X released that posthumous Static X album, and we were like, this has no reason to be as good as it is. Because Static X was Wayne Static. The other guys in the band are really cool and they contribute a lot, but Static X is Wayne Static, and for there to be a Static X album without him was insane that it was as good as it was. So along that line, Stabbing Westward, after this album came out and I listened to it, I was like, this is so good. I don't know if this has any right to be as good as it is. And so then I went back and I listened to their entire catalog, which I've owned since their albums came out back, their last album came out in 2001. And listening to their album that came out this year called Chasing Ghosts, I feel like they captured the spirit of what they were as a band in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they brought it into the 20 years later with somewhat modern technology in terms of the way everything sounds, but it still just sounds like Stabbing Westward. It very much sounds like the band as it was in 1999 when their big album came out. And the album is less raw, but I feel like that's really good. That's one of the ways that I feel like they've improved. The first song has little dubstep influence in it, which is really interesting.
Awesome.
Not something that I would necessarily expect from a new metal band. I don't know if you would. I would consider them more like a new goth metal band rather than a new metal band. But but they definitely had they were heavy enough, like Korn and Cold Chamber at the time, I would say, to be considered new metal. And one thing I do want to mention before I forget, there's 10 songs on it, and it's 51 minutes long. So it's a meaty album. It's one of those 10-song albums, which there was a lot of this year, though I'm disappointed by the amount of 8 and 9 track albums this year too. I think pretty soon we'll just get an album with one song on it.
It's so funny. I know you've mentioned for each album have the number of songs and total playtime in the notes here, and I am
Were
really
you surprised
too.
at yours?
What?
How little the amount was?
No, actually the opposite. All of my albums are unbelievably long.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in looking at my notes, before I forget, I want to just mention here that for me, Stabbing Westward gets my award for album artwork of the year.
Oh, I think
that. This is a fantastic album artwork. I absolutely love it. I would consider getting the vinyl of this just to hang on the wall behind me and have. But yeah, all 10 songs are great. One thing that Stabbing Westward always did as a band was Christopher Hall, the vocalist, who is, I think, maybe one of my favorite singers of all time. He has such a unique and cool voice, but one of the things I talk about all the time is background vocals and layering of vocals and how that can help separate a song into distinct sections. It can make a chorus feel much bigger. Stabbing Westward has always used very minimal overdubbing with vocals. And on this album, it is almost non-existent. It is just Christopher Hall singing the entire time, panned right in the middle. The audio quality of his voice and everything in the track sounds fantastic, but I feel like because the songwriting is so good and because his voice is so versatile, I don't miss the fact that he's not layering his vocals a bunch. Everything else I have on my list is probably there's all sorts of layers of things, and this album is relatively simple compared to that. I will also say the synths that they use, I've always felt that the synths and samples specifically, like the things that you hear in the song that aren't drums, bass, guitar, vocals in Stabbing Westward songs are always really interesting and unique. And like some of their songs that were pretty big back in the day, there are like samples of like just these like weird screaming high-pitched things that are actually like unpleasant to listen to. They're like the core of a song, and they have like a loop built around that like crazy screeching noise, and then they play their guitars and the drums and everything comes in over the top of it, and it creates this really cool feeling like loop sample thing. And that continues here. They use all these really interesting samples. They have really cool keyboards. There's really neat piano. The guitar sounds fantastic. And one thing that really sticks out to me is, as I mentioned on their older albums that I like a lot, the patience that they have. And I'm going to talk about that a lot with all of my albums. The patience that they have when they're writing a song. There are so many moments in these 10 songs where there's a minute or 2 minutes of building to something, or of letting something resolve for several minutes. Whether it's like, and it's not just like an interlude or something between songs. A couple of the songs have like a 1.5 minute intro, and that can feel like a lot depending on what you're looking for. But because the songs connect so well together, the fact that there's these longer sections, it really gives you time to breathe between the more intense sections. And also, like, they're not afraid to have a big, long section of the song where there isn't guitar, bass, drums, vocals performing, or guitar, bass, drums, where it's just some, like, synth pads, some minimalistic sounding electronic stuff, and then Christopher Hall singing over the top of it. And I love that kind of a thing, when a band is not afraid to write a song where the members might need to just stand on stage doing nothing for a minute while that part of the song is going. But I love that, and so I think this album is fantastic. The production is really good. I really have almost nothing to complain about it. I do think that it's not the best sounding album on my list by far. I do think that there are ways that it could sound better, like sonically, but I am super happy with it. It's very groovy. The themes of the songs are dark. There's a little bit of emo in it, but not necessarily as much as they have done in the past. It's not so sad sack. But they've always on their albums had like a happy song thrown in there to like really juxtapose the like darker gothic nature of all the songs. So it's fantastic for a band to come back 21 years later with the core 3 members or core 4 members of the band, who they've all been doing other things since then, but not necessarily together. To have them come back 21 years later, as far as I know, that's the longest gap that I know of any bands that I like. That's the longest gap a band has ever had for any of the bands that I know of.
I agree.
So,
and it makes sense, 10 minutes or 10 songs over 50 minutes. Like, you're getting at least 5 songs a minute, and that's plenty of time. It's all plenty of room to move around and do that stuff.
Absolutely. And I think the last song is actually really interesting. It has no guitars or anything on it at all. It's just a ballad, but it's very interesting and different how it works. I do think there is one song that fades out, just to like keep my fade out counter going. But it doesn't bother me enough to like worry about it as much. This year there was I think I realized this year, Chris, that there were so many things wrong with other albums that had nothing to do with fading a song out, that while I'm not saying I'm over someone fading a song out, I still think it's lazy and there's no excuse ever to do it. There are way worse things you can do on an album to like absolutely ruin an album. And we'll talk about that next time.
Yes.
But that's my number 12. I would have never in a million years thought Stabbing Westward would ever be on my top 12 albums of the year, because I started doing these lists in 2010, and they had not made an album for 9 years at that point, and now we're 11 or 12 years past that. So crazy, Stabbing Westward with Chasing Ghosts, my number 12.
It's so funny. Like, there isn't anything that I've done for 20 years, and that's something that they haven't done for 20 years. Like, it's weird, man. Are we going to listen to these?
Oh, I guess I should mention that too. Sorry, that's a good point. I had each of us pick a song to like play underneath while we're talking about the band. I don't think so.
Oh, sure.
I'm just going to have it included underneath while we're talking. But like, I know for a fact that 2 of the albums on my list, we cannot play any audio from them because I did reactions to them earlier this year, and both videos got copyrighted and but they got taken down. So, where I can, I'm going to include music underneath, and I may include like a little 10-second thing before we start talking about them of like, here's what the music sounds like, to give an example. And I know last year when we were doing this, you like looked up the band while I was talking and like listened to it a little bit. feel free to do that if you want, but just know under the video, watcher, I will probably have a song from the album that we're talking about playing. I can't have it so loud that like YouTube would recognize what it is, and I can't. If we would just stop talking for 5 seconds, that would ruin the whole point of it, because then the YouTube algorithm would be like, "Hey, what's this? This doesn't belong to you," and you know, I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to play it safe for copyright reasons, but I'll put music in underneath while we're talking so that you can maybe get a little gist of what the vibe would be. But no, we're not going to do any listening, because I think that would take too long.
And I did like, at least there's a couple of songs on here where it was like, oh, I can't wait to hear how he feels about this.
Oh,
you know,
well, if you want to, if we had like unlimited recording time, I would say yes. And then I could just edit stuff out. You know, but like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. For sure, if you want to show me something, I want to listen to it. Like maybe after we're done recording the whole thing, if we still have like a half hour of your time or whatever, we could do like let's react to just like samples of some of the songs. I would totally be willing to do that. But for now, let's not worry about that.
Okay.
So that's all right.
My number 12 is a band that has been on probably all of my top 12s since they started making music that I was aware of. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. They've done it again.
All right.
The album Cocoon for the Golden Future, as Japanese as the title can be, and
yep.
As are all of the songs. The song titles are exactly as ridiculous. Get Back the Hope, Evolve Forward, In Hazard, Shape of Trust, Ain't That So Awesome, One Shot, One Mind. Gas Will Blow You Away, As Only Breaks Is Boring.
Now, is this all in English on Spotify?
Yeah.
Okay, see, I've been listening to some Japanese music recently, and some of it I find Spotify has it listed like as the English translation, and I'm sure that this is up to the band, but some of it is just like, nope, it's just Japanese writing, and so it's like, how could you ever search for that? Like, it'd be impossible to find that. So, yeah, so okay, that's curious.
Absolutely. But I don't know. I don't have a ton to say, but it seems like it's impossible so far for them to make bad music. And because everything they do is just so dynamic and it's constantly changing genres, even within the song. And it'll go from like completely ridiculous to metal and back to, you know, speak rap or whatever. Like it's just a constant, you know, it's like one of those bingo cages where you just turn it for a while and out comes the ball and it's something totally different and they find a way to stitch it together and it's really amazing. I haven't gotten an opportunity to listen to this one a lot because it came out beginning of November and I have been just so busy I had a game I was working on basically 12 hours a day for like September through November and it, you know, that made things tough to do stuff like this, but I've listened to most of it, and it's like, all right, fine. It goes on the list. They just can't get it wrong.
Sure, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that there's all sorts of different genres and things in it, which seems to be like a staple of a lot of Japanese music, like regardless of what it is. Like Maximum the Hormone, right? One of my absolute favorite bands of all time. I think that they have made 2 masterpiece 10 out of 10 albums, and if they ever get off their butts and put all the songs that they've recorded over the last like 3 or 4 years onto an album and release it, it will be number 1 of whatever year that comes out in. But like watching people react to Maximum the Hormone on YouTube is like so exciting because it's like people's jaws are on the floor and then it goes on the floor again and then again and then again and then again, like every different section of the song. And the same thing could be said for Mook, a band I've talked about many, many times, and a band that I may or may not talk about in regards to my list this year. But like, you know, the same thing can be said for them too. So like, there's definitely something with Japanese music that allows it to switch so fast but feel natural. Like, because to me, if a band is like gimmicky, if it's like, wow, look at how many genres we can do in one song. But if it feels natural and it like feels like it all works within context of the song, that's like a really cool thing to master, and they have done that over there in Japan.
And interestingly enough, at some point this year, I love to watch people react to Metallica because somehow there are so many people who've never heard any of it, which is just wild. But one thing that I heard a reactor bring up was the way that Metallica handles transitions between the different parts in their songs and how masterful it is. And I think about how, like, that's not, you know, if that was true of every band, then it wouldn't be something that people bring up.
Right.
And I think that that's a big part of what makes their music's so good, and what is really, carries over is very parallel into these Japanese bands, is the way that they have all these different sections, and then they just string these beautiful transitions together where it just doesn't seem like, how in the world can this part be anything like this part?
Mm-hmm. It can be jarring if you go from one section to another section, but when you have a transition section in between, whether that's just like one or two measures of like some descending thing or ascending thing or something, but it's also so different because like with electronic music, like with Infected Mushroom, the entire song, like an entire 6-minute song can be one idea. Right. And then it's just building the idea to the point where you can't stand it anymore. Then there's the release and the culmination of that idea, like reaching its peak. And then it continues for a minute and then the song is over. Whereas with Japanese metal bands or any band that does like multiple genres and mixes it up really well, there's all sorts of ways to flow, like you said, in and out of different sections and transitions. And so 100%. So you're saying Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas does that really good?
Yeah, they do a great job of that. And it's even more intense than like the Metallica, because Metallica just still exists within one genre, but Fear and Loathing will go all over the place. They'll, it's chiptune 1 minute, it's metal the next, and then it's a different type of metal the next. Like it's just turned up to 11.
Now, how would you say you rate this album compared to the other Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas albums?
I would say that this is... Man, that's a tough question. I don't know if I've listened to this enough to really give it a good answer.
I'm just curious.
It seems like they're still doing stuff that I haven't heard yet, which is wild. Like you hear from it's like, awesome. Oh, they haven't done this before. How is that possible? But they keep doing it.
That's awesome. Okay. All right. On to my number 11. My number 11, and this is a good time for me to apologize to everybody, because sometimes I'll have people talk to me about my lists and they'll be like, you have too much metal on there. And I'll say, well, you
don't talk to those people anymore.
Right. And I get it. But like, also on my channel, I do like, Black Keys and stuff. So like if you're someone that, or Lights, like if you're someone that found my channel and you likes it because, and I'm not saying like I have like millions of subscribers, I have like 250, but like, it is something that is brought up on occasion. And I have to apologize because this year I have the most heavy music that I've ever had on my list of top 12. I think this is more heavy bands on my top of my 12 albums than I've ever had on my list before. But nothing comes even remotely, not even in the same stratosphere as being as heavy as this band is. This is definitely, when I order this and get my physical copy of the CD in the mail, this will be the heaviest album that I own. It's going to be the heaviest album that ever makes it into the list of my top 12 albums, for sure.
Wow.
I think. And I will say, like, I listened to Lorna Shore's album from this year, and the whole internet, everyone in the whole world was like, Lorna Shore is the greatest thing ever. Their videos make me cry because some lady died and another dude is sad. Like, oh my goodness, watching reaction videos to Lorna Shore is great. But it boggles my mind when I watch someone react to Lorna Shore and they sit there and they go, wow, this is so fascinating. No, it's not. You can't understand anything. You don't know. Especially not if you're some like, oh, I don't ever listen to metal. No.
Yeah.
You can't. The reason I bring up Lorna Shore is because all those people who love Lorna Shore, you should forget about Lorna Shore and listen to the new Allegiant album. Because seriously, I think this may be the best metal album that's ever been recorded. Like, wow. It is devastatingly heavy. I mean, it is beyond the realms of anything I've ever had on my list before. Like, I think, I can't remember if it was last year Orbit Culture, or was that the year before? I can't remember, but I had Orbit Culture on my list either last year or the year before. And that year I said, I think this is the heaviest album that I've ever had on my list. And it was very high, and I loved that album. And I still really enjoy that album by Orbit Culture called Nia.
Is this Damnum?
Yes. Damnum by Allegiant, which is spelled really weird for someone who's never seen it. It's Allegeaeon, but it's pronounced Allegiant. I found out about this band years and years ago, probably 10 years ago at this point, and I bought their album. It was one from 2009, I think, I want to say, or around that time. maybe it was a few years later. It doesn't matter. But I listened to it and I liked it. I thought it was okay. Lots of lead guitars, lots of insane solos, but they also had these like long moments of acoustic classical guitar. And I was like, this is really cool. This is really interesting, but overall, I didn't feel like it worked as well. And then I forgot about the band for 10 years or however long it's been. And I found out they had a new album that came out this year. This is the album on my list that I found out most recently. So this is the album I've had the least amount of time with. I've only listened to this entire album twice. I've listened to parts of it multiple times. I've listened to it once all the way through on my headphones when I was sort of on the verge of sleep, and then it like woke me up because I was so shocked by how amazing it was. And I listened to it once sitting on my recliner with speakers just blasting at me. Both ways were equally enjoyable. This album is so fast, so heavy, so unrelenting, and at the same time so gorgeous, so beautiful, so melodic, so masterfully mixed, so incredibly well put together, so thought out. So I found out about this album by looking up albumoftheyear.com and looking up their list of top metal albums of the year, because I was just curious.
That website.
Me too.
I think it's .org actually, but yeah.
Oh, .org. Okay, albumoftheyear.org. Okay, right.
Yep.
I was looking up, and this was like number 13 or something on their list for the year. And I think this was a list that was compiled in July, so it was like a halfway through the year list. And I was like, oh, I'll check that out. And I put it on and I started listening to it, and I was like, I'm not feeling this right now. And then, like I said, I listened to it on headphones in bed, and I was like, whoa, okay. And I just... It's hard to talk about this album because, like, some of the albums on my list this year I feel like are really good personal picks for me. And I say that sometimes in the past. I've said, like, the year that Mesh was my number one album, their album Looking Skyward, I was like, this is not an album necessarily for everybody. And I'm not saying that this is, like, the best album ever, but to me, with my personal tastes, this was, like, the best album of the year. So this is another one of those for me. Like, there are certain things in metal that I really enjoy, and there are certain things in metal that I absolutely hate. Like, you know, Chris, I cannot stand it when the song is just, like, so heavy, and then it gets to the chorus, and the guy's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm just like, oh my God, please no. Like, you've lost all of the intense credit that you build up, and then you get to the chorus, and it's just like Fall Out Boy, and it's just like, meh.
I love that stuff, man.
Nothing wrong. I know. That's like your thing, totally 100%. And I think I have an album on my list later, in my list, that's gonna like shock you, and you're gonna be like, "You said earlier that you didn't like this," and I'll be like, "I definitely."
Just exactly what I sound like.
And so, okay. So I see we're gonna run out of time in less than a minute. So I'm gonna end the meeting, and I'll just start a new one right up. Okay. I can't remember what I was saying because we just got interrupted, but I'll say this album sounds fantastic. It's very heavy. It's very fast. There are so many more progressive elements to this now. I believe they have gone from being like whatever they were considered before, like a deathcore band or something, to being a progressive metal band. There are these nice long sections where there's clean vocals, which there were 0 clean vocals on the album that I bought from them 10 years ago, however long. So they now have clean vocals. There are some really cool, like, groovy riffs that are much more like the metal that I would normally listen to, that is more like groove-based, like djenty maybe sort of stuff. Heavy because of the pattern and the guitar riff being like a pattern more so than crazy shredding like lead guitar stuff. So there are moments like that where the riff is super heavy and chuggy, and then the singer has a high scream voice, a low growl voice. He can go down to like a pig squeal and stuff like that, though he doesn't do that very often. But then he also has like a really, really good singing voice that is like lower register, but he's good enough at singing high that he can do like high harmonies. So when he's clean singing, there's all these like wall of sound background vocals that are really nice. Very prog metal, prog rock sounding when it's clean stuff. When it's distorted, it reminded me a little bit of Lorna Shore, which is why I bring them up and say people should stop listening to Lorna Shore and listen to this band because they're way better in every way, in my opinion. And I'm kidding when I say that because I know so many people love Lorna Shore, so don't hate me. But seriously, just go listen to this album instead. But like, it's so cool. There are a lot of moments on this album when they do the clean singing when it's over the metal, where it sounded very much to me like one of my favorite bands that hasn't released an album for 10 years now called Scar Symmetry.
Oh, sure.
I love that band, and they have like 3 of the best metal albums I think I've ever heard. And they are one of the bands that got me into metal as well when I was in high school and in college, when their first album came out when I was in college. But like there are moments that reminded me of that band. There are a lot of moments that reminded me maybe of some like Children of Bodom, because they don't have a guy that plays keyboards in the band that I'm aware of. I think they just have all this like different program stuff. So it's mostly guitar, bass, drums, vocals. And then there will be longer sections where they have like piano and strings and stuff, with mainly featuring classical acoustic guitar over those sections as well. And it can be that those sections can be in the middle of a full-on balls to the wall metal song, or it can be like an intro to a song or an outro or something like that. I don't think there's a single track on the album that's just like a down-tempo thing. They have one song that has this really cool like ethnic feel to it, with all this like ethnic percussion and like timbalas and congos and bongos and things, and these really different sort of like ethnic sounding drums. That's very cool. It's very jazzy. There's like this crazy like bass solo on that song. The lead guitar soloing is insane across the entire album. It is not just shredding for shredding's sake, which was one of the problems I had with Lorna Shore. Lorna Shore like actually made me laugh several times when I was listening to their album, because they do these like for them, Lorna Shore, like their breakdowns are like the thing. So like the song builds to a breakdown and it's the most like crushing thing ever. And he's doing these dumb sounding pig squeals over the top of it. And for me, being someone that's like, I guess like an elitist metal jerk, I listen to that and just roll my eyes and go like, oh my gosh, you're gonna have 3 breakdowns in a song. Every breakdown's gonna sound identical, and the whole thing you're doing the whole time over it is just going like, I don't want that. Like, I don't care about that. The other thing was the guitar solos for Lorna Shore. It was just, the moment it started, it was just like, it was just sweeps. It was just sweeps up and down the guitar neck. And there was no melody to it really whatsoever. Now, the cool thing about Lorna Shore, to give them some credit, is the symphonic elements. Like, there is an orchestra playing the entire time over the entire album. It is fantastic. So props to that. And props to the musicians for being fantastic. But for Allegiant, the guitar solos are melodic. They're shredding, but they're melodic. They're singy. They feel like they fit with the theme of the song. They can incorporate the lead guitar riff from the song into the solos. And for that, I love the guitar playing. The themes of the song are really interesting. I actually sat and I pulled up the lyrics on my phone, because one of the things that I like to do with super intense heavy metal albums is read the lyrics when I'm listening to the album. I don't normally do that with all genres of music, but with metal, I find that really helps. And I didn't have the CD for this because I haven't ordered it yet. I was just listening to it on Spotify. And so I looked up the lyrics, and in reading the lyrics, I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that the structuring of the songs, which, you know, Chris, is something that's very important to me, song structure, they do go back to the choruses multiple times in every single song on the album, but sometimes the chorus will be a completely different style of music, but they're doing the chorus again. It's just, it sounds completely different. And so like, I give them props for that. The musicianship is incredible. The sonic quality. Have you been listening to this at all? Did you look it up?
Yeah, I'm listening to it right now, actually.
The sonic quality of the metal is fantastic. The kick and the snare sounds great. Now, I have not heard this yet in like wave, like lossless format. I've only heard it in the 192 kilobit free version of Spotify version. So I'm sure it would sound even fantastic with more low end and stuff on like the CD when I get the CD. But everything about it is fantastic. I think that for me, an album like this is much better consumed as a whole. Like, this is much more of a enjoy the whole thing as a single piece of like art, which is weird to say maybe, but I feel like I would pick this album up less and just listen to like 1 or 2 songs here or there. When I want to listen to this album in the future, it's probably because I've had a bad day and I'm pissed off at something and I just want to like pummel something for a while. But I also want to say, like, this is not just that. Like, I felt like Lorna Shore was more about, and I shouldn't keep going back to Lorna Shore and crapping on them so much, but they were such a huge thing this year on YouTube. Like, all the YouTube channels that I watch reacted to Lorna Shore, and I was just so baffled by it every time I saw someone reacting to it. But like, one of the things that was crazy about them was they focus on like the aggression and then like the the contrast to like the beautiful nature of like the symphonic elements over the top of it. Whereas I feel like with Allegiant, they incorporate the more melodic, pretty sounds into the actual music itself, and they're not afraid to have sections that just like straight up sound like not like a metal song. And so for all the stuff I just mentioned, I think that this album is fantastic. I've only listened to it, like I said, a couple times. If this album came out at the beginning of the year and I had found out about it and I had listened to this album across the whole year, I would not, like, this album could easily probably have been in my top 5 or even 4.
Oh, sure.
But I just didn't have enough time with it to digest it that much. And also, like, I totally understand this is probably the least accessible album on my entire list. Possibly the least accessible album that I've ever had on any one of my lists, because it is just so crushing and brutal. So
Mook is far less accessible, I think.
Well, it's not English, but which for sure. See, I don't even consider that when thinking about that, because that's not something to me. But but no, I think Mook is way more accessible than this. Oh yeah. To the average person who doesn't listen to metal, Mook has whole songs that aren't metal songs. You know,
no, I didn't mean for metal specifically. I just meant in general. Like, Mook is so abstract, it seems like. I've listened to a couple of, I don't know, whatever the last Mook album you had on one of these, I went back and tried to listen to it while I was working out, and I was like, well, this is chaos. I don't want to listen to this.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll talk more about Mook later. So that's my number 11, Allegiant, their album Damnum, which is spelled Damnum.
Mm-hmm. So, hard pivot. My number 11 is the new album by Death Cab.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. I didn't even know they had an album. So, okay.
Yeah, it came out of left field a little bit, despite, I mean, I don't know. It's not like the newspapers were shocked at the release of a Death Cab album. But I just don't know if I didn't really expect one. I was like, oh, I mean, I guess, yeah, because when you get a new album coming, it's like, here's a single. You know, you'll start to see things trickle out, and it just sort of appeared one day. And they also, like, they do the occasional EP and some other stuff, so I guess it was kind of a surprise.
Well, that was going to be one question I had for you, because the last time I thought about Death Cab for Cutie is when you talked about them on, I think on either 2014 or 2015 when we did one of our lists for the music room, because that was the last time you brought them up to me, and because I don't ever listen to them, they're not in my circle of things to keep, you know. So have they been releasing music consistently since then, or?
Yes, for the most part. They had an album, let's see here. They had an album come out, I think 2019, I think. Please hold. Talk amongst yourselves.
Well, one thing I will say, and I think we should keep in mind while we're listening, is, are we still, I feel like one of the reasons this year is so fantastic is because we're still catching up on all the stuff that was created during COVID.
Yes, I agree with that.
So if you have like a specific like COVID album, let me know, because like the Damnum album from Allegiant, there are definitely themes on that album that are specifically referencing COVID and the feeling of isolation and stuff that I'm pretty sure came from that. And so just a thing to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Transatlanticism was 2003, Plans was 2005, Narrow Stairs 2008, you know, every 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Kintsugi 2015, 2018, and now this one. So it's only
okay, so
off
3
the
albums
mark by
since
a little
then.
bit.
Because Kintsugi or whatever is the album you talked about in 2015.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite albums by theirs.
Yeah.
And by them. And then Thank You for Today is just, it's also really good. It has one of my very favorite songs of theirs.
What's the track listing and time? Because I forgot to do that for Allegiant. I'll tell
Death
you
Cab?
next time. Yeah.
Death Cab. I'll do it for both. Fear and Loathing is 11 songs, 38 minutes.
Okay.
Death Cab is 11 songs, 42 minutes.
Okay.
So both perfectly respectable. They break the rule. They stay within the rules of song number and length.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Not insulting to the listener.
I know it.
I mean, if you release a 9-track album and there's an intro track and an outro track, you are fooling yourself in the music industry by calling that an album.
Yeah,
unless you're a prog band and it's 40 minutes long.
Right, I was going to say, and at the same time, fooling nobody because, because it's just an EP. Just call it an EP. I don't know why it doesn't.
100%.
And I think every single intro track needs to be cut and thrown into a fire. I cannot stand intro tracks.
I like intro tracks. I just don't whatever. Keep talking about.
I don't know. What are they? I mean, like what?
I like it personally, but it's like the intro to a movie or something. You know, it's like setting the tone. You know.
Nah, it's not for me.
Okay.
I what the hell's that? I think Absolution, right? That Muse album from '04, like the ultimate Muse album. Intro track.
That is stupid. It should just be part of the
Yes,
first song.
it should
100%.
just be part of the song.
If it's
every
that,
time.
yes. But if it's like a whole song to itself that's just like instrumental or something, and then that like leads into the first track with vocals, and then the rest of the album, every song has vocals, like that kind of stuff I love.
Yeah, I can dig that.
But yeah,
But
you're
it's
right.
like, oh, here's 15
Absolution
seconds
is a great
of,
example of
a crow like, "Nah," and then it's track 2. It's like, get the hell out of here with that
stupid,
trash.
you're right.
Fucking clown.
Or listening to any like hip hop album that's like a mixtape thing, where a song will just end, and then there's like two dudes talking in the studio for like 30 seconds, and then another track, like a beat starts behind them, and then oh god, mixtapes. I hate the way mixtapes are made. I hate it,
Man.
But anyway, go ahead.
And I will say there is an Offspring album from like 2001, I think, that has the intro track, and he's like something like, we got together and we wrote some songs, and they go a little something like this, and that's the whole intro. But at the time, making mix CDs, like the 14-year-old that I was, I would put that intro track at the beginning of my mix CDs all the time.
I love it. Okay, Death Cab for Cutie.
Death Cab, yeah. So this album, I don't know, there's a very specific type of like Death Cab catchiness that they have always been able to nail down, except for Codes and Keys, which is an unlistenable album by them that I will not. I've tried it a couple of times. Like I listened to it, it came out, I was like, I hate this. This is garbage. And then I went back and listened to it a couple of times over the years. Like maybe it wasn't so bad. And it's like, yep, this is garbage. And it's just, and that's a big part of why it's no good, is because like, we're going to try something different. And then by that, they mean we're going to stop doing the thing that makes us good. And
oh, you got to hate it when a band does that.
I know it, man. And, proud we are of all of them for doing that and getting it out of their system. But this absolutely maintains a lot of that. Death Cab, there's a very specific type of very simple, repetitive catchiness that they do so well. And with their lyrics being just, Ben Gibbard's one of my favorite lyricists of all time, because he has a way of just, there's nothing fancy or symbolic or nothing poetic about the way that the way he sings songs. It's always like, these are the words. It's like if he walked up to you and just told you that story without any music, it would be the same. And I love that, because I'm garbage at lyrical interpretation, and it's really nice that someone can meet me halfway.
For sure.
But this one it didn't quite catch me in a way that the previous album did. There's a song on the previous album where it's like, every time I hear it, you have to hear it at least twice in a row. Like it's like, well, I'll just take this off of shuffle for a minute and listen to it a couple of times and then go back to it. But there's still some good stuff in there. However, there is one song that is just music over, and it's actually, this is a really ironic thing now that I realize after what I just said, but there's a song that's just music, and over the top of it is just some guy talking, just like, and it's just unlistenable. Like it is a hard stop.
Is it supposed to be
time.
like have meaning to it? Like, is the person like an important person or something?
Oh,
like
probably.
That?
I'm not sure who's
I'm just
doing
curious,
the talking.
like...
Yeah, I know. I'm sure, it's just, I'm going to make a statement now, and I'm going to do nothing to make it pretend it's music in any way. I'm just going to put music behind it so that you don't get entirely bored. But I don't know what is being said. I don't care. And it, for me, it's just like, oh God. And you just get frustrated. Next. I don't want to hear this mess. And so it's like, yeah, well, that's not great. But otherwise they've done such a great job of maintaining their sound and their style after they lost their guitarist, like 2 or 3 albums ago, I think, maybe like that.
Oh,
I think
okay.
after Kintsugi, he left the band, and I was like, oh no, what's going to happen now? And they didn't really miss a beat. I imagine it has a lot of it to do with Ben Gibbard being the primary songwriter, so everything is fine there.
That's what I would guess, not knowing anything about him.
Yeah, for sure.
It's tough when someone leaves the band and it fundamentally changes them. That's what happened with Interpol, and I'm still waiting for them to release an album that was as good as their last album they had with their primary songwriter. He left the band, and they haven't. So.
There's a band on my list by an album on my list by a band called Palisades, and they have always they have at least 2 albums where they have this really fantastic mix of like hip hop and metal, and it's almost like an R&B in times where it just flips back and forth, and it's got a lot of soul style like R&B music, and then it's also this really percussive, like funky, chopped up sort of metal sound. And the last 2 albums, I think 2 or 3, No, it's gone. They're very much more of a traditional like metalcore band, and I think it's by virtue of whoever was responsible for that old
Just
sound
left
is
the
not
band.
there anymore. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a real shame. I think there's another band called Issues that did something very similar. Issues.
Mhm.
A funny story about them is the only time that a band has released an album so bad that I sold the tickets to the live show that I had because I was like, I will not go to a show where this is the tour that they're doing because I don't want to hear any of this. Even and most frustratingly about that is that their best song is on that same album, and it's like, how
Oh,
dare
that's
you?
tough.
How dare
That's tough. One hit wonder on that album. Like that's the one
Yes.
hit one. Mhm.
And it's a shame. But yeah, Death Cab. Yeah, I don't know. It's not. I don't. And one of the other problems too about this one for me, and it's like it is in my top 12 of 40, so it's still a great album. And I realized earlier, like, as I was writing up my notes for these albums, I was like, oh, I'm just talking about why all of these are not number one. It just seems like a long
sure.
string of negatives that you don't necessarily want to make it sound like I'm really upset about this band. I'm disappointed about it, blah blah blah. But it does, like, the lyrics, by virtue of him being such a great lyricist that I can, really grab a hold of what he's talking about. This one doesn't hit me in quite the same way as the other stuff has. I think maybe just like thematically, it's not my perspective. He's talking about something I don't really live.
Is it a COVID album?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
He does actually.
Curious.
There's one song on there that is my favorite song of the album, and it's called. I put it in my notes. I swear to God. Oh, it's called I Miss Strangers More Than I Miss My Friends. I mean, it's called I Miss Strangers, but if there were to be a parenthetical tag, it would be More Than I Miss My Friends because that's the rest of the chorus. But like that
sounds like
COVID.
a COVID reference.
That's pure
for sure.
COVID, absolutely.
So was this album recorded during COVID then too?
I would assume so, but I don't know. I'd have to like read the wiki on it or something.
That's all right.
But yeah.
I'm just curious to like keep that in mind because like I think we said this last year, like I think we're getting like some of these bands that we're going to talk about, I think we're getting like maybe the best album they'll ever release, and I think that is purely because of COVID forcing them to work differently, and then also because I prefer like darker things and like more negative feelings. Like I like darker music. We're getting a lot of bands who are either they're doing the opposite thing, like Interpol tried to do this with their album from this year and I didn't like it as much. They wanted to make a happy album because there's so much sadness in the world.
Sure.
And that doesn't appeal to me as much. But then other bands released an album that's like so sarcastic or like darker than they normally would because the whole world just has been feeling dark and stuff. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that's just something to keep in mind as we keep moving forward. Maybe next year we won't even notice it anymore and we're out of the COVID, whatever it was.
I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for the fact that there's 40 albums on my list in terms of things to pull from because of the COVID backlog, where it's just like they pulled the gate on the reservoir and out comes everything people have been working on for 2 years.
Okay, so my next album for me to move on.
Mm-hmm. Ah, yes, very good.
My number 10. I'm so happy you've heard this, so we can discuss a little.
Mm-hmm.
Rack Shack by Bloodywood. Like, I did my reaction to this on my channel, and it's the most viewed video I have on my channel, which is great.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
And I listened to it, and I was blown away. But there was something about it that kind of like, I wouldn't say that it rubbed me the wrong way, but I didn't necessarily care for like the dude's voice when he was rapping. I was just like, this is like, there's like a style he has that's, it sounds to me like he's trying to be like super macho, and that totally like throws me off, and I don't enjoy that.
Sure.
And so I listened to this album for the reaction, and then when I was editing the video, I listened to it again, and I was like, this might be a little bit better than I think it was. And then I put it aside for like a month or more. Mm-hmm. And then when I was getting ready for this list over the last 2 months, because I always start in October, I listened to it and I was just like, this is incredible. This album is so good from front to back. It has so many elements in it that are just nowhere else in heavy music. Like, there is not, like, it sounds like Korn mixed with, like, the good elements of Korn mixed with a gent band. Like, I couldn't believe how much like gentiness there was to this, because I had an expectation of what this album was going to sound like based on the few singles that I had heard like the year before. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, this is really cool, and I like that the guy, like, the rap is in this. But at the time when I heard those singles, that rapper guy was not a part of the band. It was just a song from Bloodywood featuring that guy.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Well, and so now he's like a legit part of the band. He's in every song on this album. And like there are even songs on this album. It says on here like there's 10 songs on here, and 6 of the songs were recorded for this album. 4 of the songs are songs from previous years that they kind of reworked to make them sound a little bit better, I think, and then they're included on this. So of the 10 songs, 6 were made specifically for this album, 4 were older songs that were kind of refurbished for this collection. And the interesting thing about that is I vastly prefer the 6 songs that were created for this. However, their big singles are the other 4 songs that were like made to like they were reworked to go with this album. And those are the songs that have all the like extra percussion and the weird little buzzy instrument that I always find annoying because it sounds like a fly. And like those songs have a lot more of like the Indian folk music in it, which I enjoy those aspects of it. But for me, this band and this album shines when they are being like a metal band, a gent band, and they are just like, I think the vocalist that does the harsh vocals is like one of the greatest harsh vocalists of all time. He is so versatile. He can rap so fast, even though he's not the rapper in the band.
Yeah.
He looks phenomenal in their videos. He's got the long hair and it just looks cool. And everything about that dude is cool. Everything about this band really is cool. They have all sorts of cool topics that they talk about. A lot of the album is like politically charged, which throws me off. But then I think, hey, this isn't political about the United States, really. This is political about their country. So I don't care about their politics, really. So like that doesn't bother me. I think that some of the lyrics, the only negative thing I would say, kind of like I mentioned, is like I do think some of the lyrics, it really sounds like they're trying to be like macho rapper dude, and that is like the only negative I would say. But those kind of moments are sort of like farther between. I feel like a lot of the time the rap verses do actually have something poignant to say. It's very cool. They speak up a lot about a lot of like negative things on this album, and I totally agree with all of that stuff. I think their stance on like certain things I really agree with. I think that the production is fantastic. As I say every time we talk about symphonic metal, like, or Celtic or like folk metal, like it is so hard to mix a metal song. Then to put on top of that all these crazy instruments that are not like meant for metal. It is so hard, and these songs are so full of so many different instruments and cool rhythmic things, and they do there's so many neat elements. There's no, like the guy who screams, there's no clean vocals really on this album, if you listen to it. Yeah. There's rapping, which you could consider like a clean vocal, but when the dude, like the singer dude from the band that does the harsh vocals is singing, every vocal is like a harsh vocal, but he's so good at doing it and like singing in a harsh vocal style that it sounds like there's lots of melody. But then there's all the cool background stuff. It's so cool. The guitar riffs are crushing. Like I said, the corn elements on this feel so awesome. The intro riff on the album is so cool. Like it's great. It's a great album.
Yeah. And I really love like the Indian folk style and all of these different,
so unique.
Yes, and I love it in all of the music that it exists in before this album came to be, like all the traditional like Indian like Bollywood style music. I'm
the exact opposite. Just not to cut you off, like I do not like that style of music at all.
Sure. And
I've told you a million times that I don't really like congos and bongos and like percussion instruments that you hit like this. That is not for me. There's a lot of it in Latin music, and it's hard for me to get over some of that stuff, but I love a lot of Latin music. But so I'm totally the opposite of you. Like to me, this is like something special because it's an exception rather than like
for me. Sure. And I can understand why that would get it, higher on your list. But yeah, I really love that style of music anyway, and I love hearing it show up in metal. And like the same thing goes for the Who, where it's like here's this traditional Mongolian folk style music, and they're being put through this filter of not quite metal. I'm still waiting for them to get a little bit heavier if they decide to go that route, but like just this rock music where it's like here's some traditional folk, like a stick with some kind of weird string made out of an animal I've never heard of, and on underneath a bunch of shredding guitars, and it's just such a wonderful mix of the two different styles, and I will accept hearing it all the time out of every different type of nationality and whatever you want to call it. Like, I'm super into it.
I think one of the most impressive things to me is that, like, every time I listened to this, I liked it more than the last time. You know, I kind of mentioned how I wasn't necessarily feeling super high on it at first, and I listened to it like a couple months later, and I loved it. Every time I listen to this, I grow to enjoy it more, and I think that will just continue to be the case.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it deserves to be higher on my list just because how great everything else is, but this is like a really special album.
Sure.
So,
and like, their cover of Tunak Tunak 10 by Dollar Mini is fire. I really, like, genuinely love that song anyway. It's very catchy.
That's
and so
the one
fun.
exception to the rule for me. That was, when you say Tunak Tunak 10, that makes me think of high school.
Yes,
one of the first viral things I ever saw ever. We watched that video so much when I was in high school. That was way before YouTube existed. You know, YouTube wasn't even a thing. And so, like, I think we talked about this even at this year, because I found out that they did like a metal version of that or something. I don't remember. But like, when I found out about that, I was so excited. And then I found out they had an album coming out. And I think this album came out earlier in the year, though I can't remember exactly. Yeah. And so, like, I should say, I keep forgetting to do this. 10 songs, 47 minutes.
Great.
And
Perfectly
also,
acceptable.
Let me just catch up on a couple things. They are from India. I said that. A Legion, 12 songs, 60 minutes exactly.
Nice.
They are from Colorado, United States.
Oh, I would not have guessed that at all.
No, not by listening to it. That's one of the things that was so special. And I was going to talk about how I think they're maybe the best metal band in the United States, but I'm going to bring that up now. Last thing,
everything. The name of the band, the name of the album, the art from the album,
style of music. 100%.
None of it screams Colorado metal band.
It's purely like, but if you watch their videos, they're just out in the hills of Colorado. Like, awesome. they embrace where they're from, and I think that's really cool.
That's great. Totally.
Like, I could drive to the guy's house and have him like autograph my copy of the album from here. So, like,
that'd be amazing.
I could never do that with Soilwork, In Flames, Demon Hunter, Nemec, Raunchy, Scar Symmetry, Sonic Syndicate, any of the bands that I liked growing up. Children of Bodom, none of those bands, I never even get the opportunity to see them live. And this band is really cool and badass, and they're one state over. Okay, you're number 10, I think, right?
Number 10, yes. According to Spotify, my most listened to band of
that's
the
interesting. Okay.
Is The Annex with Revenge.
The deluxe edition?
I don't know. Let me look. That's what a funny.
I don't know. I can't remember if there's a deluxe edition of this one.
I don't know
if
there is.
The guy, I think he just likes to release a music like every 2 weeks. And
he does.
The dude is so prolific.
It's just a constant music dump, this guy. He's on par with Clayton and Unlike Pluto. Like, people who just cannot stop making music come out. It's insane the way they work. This song, album, no exception, 15 songs, an hour and 5 minutes. One of them is an acoustic live song, which doesn't count. But
hey, it's included on there, so that's cool.
But it's on here. It's number 15. And yeah, like I said, according to Spotify, this is my most listened to song album of the year, and contains my most listened to songs, I think, of the year, which is, what? And I think it probably is a matter of, like, the type of music that it is makes it fit in line more with the type of stuff that I can work to than most other types of music.
I was wondering that. And he maybe even released an instrumental version of this too. I don't know.
That could very possible, yeah, for sure. But
I just know he usually, like, because his last album that came out, I think last year, that was the first time where I was like, okay, I need to, like, look into this guy, because everything I'm hearing when I listen to one of his songs, it's like, this is everything that I love in music combined in, like, one band. Yeah. And I know specifically with his album from last year, or his last album, whether it was last year or the year before, I remember thinking it's
2020, yeah.
Yeah, I remember thinking that it sounded more raw and more like, there was more like distortion to it. Because some of his earlier stuff is like, it is more like Clayton. It does sound more like just straightforward electronic music. But anyway, the point I'm making is this Graphite album is even more continuing in that direction of making it more distorted, more raw sounding.
Graphite's 2020.
Oh, Graphite's
Revenge
2020.
is this year.
Okay, so maybe I might be getting them mixed up. So,
and there is actually, yes, there is a deluxe album. It's 29 songs and includes instrumentals of all of them.
Okay, I thought that was true. I will just say for this album, so I gave this album like a good shot. Like, I've never liked The Annex enough to include any of his albums, and I think the thing that's so frustrating to me about them is like it's so close to Inner Party System. The way he sings, like,
oh, you're
it's
so right.
so close. And for those of you who don't know, Inner Party System released one album. It's one of the most phenomenal albums of all time. I honest to God literally think that it might be my favorite album of all time. I'm slowly trying to compile that list.
Ooh, what a thing to say.
I really do think so. But Chris and I have been looking for something to like that sounds like that for so many years, and because that album came out I think in 2009, the Inner Party System album, or around there, and this sounds close to that. But when I sat down and tried to listen to this album, I think I noticed some inconsistencies with like the mastering and the sonic quality from song to song. And I think that that's purely just because it's one dude working by himself over time. You know, some of these songs could have been made for other projects and then brought over here, and then the same filters are thrown on them that are thrown on other songs to make it sound like a whole album, which I don't know if that's true or not. But it seemed a little inconsistent with like the volumes of everything relative to other tracks. Like some of the songs sounded like obviously better than others, which is something that threw me off. And I found myself after like 5 songs thinking like, I kind of think all these songs sound kind of the same.
They do.
And I just kind of taper off like at around track 7 or so every time I try to listen to it. So for that reason, this album didn't make it on my list.
Sure. And I will say very consistently, that is a real criticism of his music. It's just like it's like on its own. Any individual song you hear is like, well, this is fire. And then you go listen to the album and it's like, ooh, 15 songs. Hell yeah. And then you get 8 in and you're like, but this is just one song.
Yes, that's exactly how I felt. 100%.
And it loses its luster a bit because it is just the same thing over and over again. And the title, not the title track, the intro track, My Eyes, sharing a title with one of the greatest songs of all time by Nero, My Eyes.
Okay.
Which is, I don't know, we're in the same page on that, right?
Well, the Nero song that's Satisfy is the great Nero song.
They have 2. My Eyes was their first, was Satisfy before Satisfy existed.
Well, there's nothing like Satisfy, but yes.
As good as it gets.
Yeah, but you're right.
And it seems, I don't want to say that it sounds like he's trying to make that song over, but there's a lot of similarities I felt between those 2 songs, which is high praise. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please try to remake
Reach for
My
the
Eyes.
Stars if you're going to
give us
try to build a rocket.
That, because Nero doesn't seem interested in giving new music ever again. And if they do, if they're just making Satisfy over and over 16 times for the next album of the year, I don't give a shit. That's fine.
That would be, yeah.
But yeah, so by virtue of being relatively samey for all 15 songs, as unfortunate as that, where it's like, hell yeah, 15 songs for an hour, and then it's like, oh, dang, this is not what I meant. It's kind of almost like a Twisted Metal wish.
Yes. But it is still fantastic. I just want to say
it is very good.
For me, it didn't impress me as much, but like I actually think that I would have said that his last album was a little better than this one. But that's just me.
Yeah. Sure. And I think his last album was probably on my list as well, because it is good enough, I think, to make my list most of the time. I just wish that he could mix it up just a little bit more. Yeah,
and don't you think that if he took like a year or 2 off and he had that extra time to like really work on the songs and make them as special as possible, he'd have like the best album he's ever released?
Yeah. You know what's interesting about what you said earlier about how much it reminded you of Clayton before? He's on Fixed.
Yes. Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I just remembered that. And it's like, it's really interesting to me how a bunch of bands on the same label can sound so much like the guy who owns the label.
Well, he curates, everything on Fixed sounds the way Clayton wants it to sound.
Right. And you can tell that it does. And I just don't know how many labels operate that way.
No, I don't know either. But that's to the betterment of everyone on the label. I don't say that in like a bad thing. That's a good thing.
So I was going to say, speaking of Clayton, you don't have to answer this. Is he on your list?
No.
Interesting. Okay, go ahead.
Should I ask you the same thing, or should I not ask you that?
No. The answer is no.
Okay, I won't. He's not.
He is not.
We'll talk about him tomorrow on our honorable mentions, I have a feeling.
Yes. I suspect that's what we'll do.
Also, we just had to break because stupid Zoom is dumb, and I went to get my beverage and my backup water, and it was frozen into a solid brick of ice.
That's good.
But I broke it up now, so I'll get to eat some chunks of ice and whatever. I won't die of thirst. Okay, so are we good? You want to move on then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that means we are on to. Oh, dog, here we go. Are you ready to talk about the best song that was released this year? On the album that has produced the best album that was released this year, the best sounding album with the best song. I am, of course, talking about Muse's album, Will of the People.
There it is. Yep, I knew it. I'm surprised it's number 9, but I knew it.
Or should I say, the Will of the People, the Will of the People, the Will of the People. So, this freaking album just blew me away. And I think I learned when listening to this that like I wasn't a big fan of Muse. Like I think that I have tried to like Muse, and I for some reason hate the album that everyone pretty universally says is their best album, Black Holes and Revelations.
Oh.
Yeah, I think most people like Black Holes and Revelations.
They're wrong. Absolution's better.
I cannot get through that whole album. I do think Absolution is better, but not as good as this album, in my opinion.
Sure. Especially with the things that you focus on the most.
Production.
The thing that upsets me about Absolution is the way it sounds. It does sound its age.
And I honestly don't even think that it sounds that bad. Like
it doesn't. It just seems thin.
One of the things that I really enjoyed this year musically for me is I bought at a garage sale over the summer for like $1. I bought a DVD player that's a Sony DVD player that has like CD buttons or whatever on the front. And so I've been looking for one of those forever that's just basically like, I basically just use it as a CD player. You know, I just put my CD in, I don't have it connected to a screen of any kind. It just registers right away. And then there's just a play, rewind, fast forward, skip, track, whatever button on the front. Nice. And so I have that hooked up to my speaker system. And for the first time in years, I've been able to, sit and listen to CDs out loud. Normally I listen to CDs with my headphones and my CD player, or in a car or wherever I happen to be, you know, a little portable speaker or something that I have attached to my CD player. But listening to Will of the People on my speaker system, I mean, there's no album in the history of the universe that I would turn up louder than this one because it sounds so fantastic. Like every nanosecond of this album is the cleanest, clearest, most well-recorded thing I've ever heard. It is insane to me. And I was going to say this before, but I saved it for this. In the past, we have talked about Satisfy by Nero being like the benchmark. To me, that is not the benchmark anymore. Now, You Make It Feel Like It Is Halloween is the greatest sounding thing I have ever heard in my life. I think it is the most well-recorded, well-put-together piece of music that I've ever heard. I think it is my favorite song, like my number one favorite of all-time song.
Wow.
And I was so close to purchasing. They released around Christmas time. They released like a vinyl. It cost $11 of just the single of "You Make It Feel Like Halloween," and I was so close to buying it. And then I was like, I don't want to waste $11 on some dumb vinyl, and so I didn't buy it. But the reason I bring all that up is because I loved this album so much, I went through the back catalog of Muse and I brought all their CDs that I have downstairs, which is I've heard every Muse album except for their first two albums, Origin of Symmetry and whatever the other one is.
What the hell's that called?
Their first two albums, the one with like the goalposts,
right,
the one with the goalposts on the front, and then the one with the blue with like the people on the front. But I have all of their other albums, with the exception of their album that came after Drones. The 80s.
Drones is where I fell off too.
Well, I like Drones, but the 80s synth wave. Simulation Theory, yes. That album I don't have on CD, though I have heard that entire album. But anyway, in listening to Absolution down here on my really good speakers, the thing that's impressive to me is it is what you're hearing is what they were playing. Like there is no drum replacement on that album.
On which one?
on Absolution.
Oh, sure. Okay.
It is 100% like the drums are the drums that he was playing, and with microphones in a room, and that is what it is. And the guitars are the same thing. Like I don't even know if they did like any reamping on it. They may have. I mean, reamping technology's been around for way longer than re-drumming technology. But I really do think that album sounds really good. It just sounds good in a different way, but whatever.
Sure. That's fair. That's very fair.
Will of the frickin' people. When I read online, I gasped out loud when I read that this album was created because their record label, which is Warner Brothers, Warner Records, they were like, "Hey Muse," they were like, "Hey Muse, come on over here for a sec." Matt Bellamy walks over. He's like, "Hey, we want you to release a greatest hits. We're just going to release a greatest hits for you." And he's like,
"No.
Instead, we'll just write a whole album of just greatest hits, like new ones." And the guy's like, "Okay." And so they went into the studio and they frickin' did exactly that. Every one of these songs is a hit song in a completely different way, in a completely different reason. You can so obviously hear that, like, this is the song that sounds like it could have been on Absolution. This is the song that sounds like it could have been on The Resistance. This is the song that sounds like it is absolutely.
That's really interesting.
It is insane. And like I said, the only problem I have with this album is that I feel like it's too short. Mm-hmm. It's 10 songs, and it is a full. It's 10. Here, let me look. It's 10 songs, 38 minutes.
Ooh, that is right on the border.
Well, it's okay. Right. It's all about context. Mm-hmm. I do feel like every song is good. I like every song on this album. I do feel like the weakest song is Ghosts, which is just piano and Matthew Bellamy singing plus a few little like synth pads. Mm-hmm. And he said, even in an interview the same interview where he was talking about how when the studio asked him, he said that he was worried about Ghosts because it's the only time on any Muse album that they released a song that is just piano and him singing. And I thought to myself, I don't know if that's true, but I looked at all the albums I have and there is no other song like that. All the other songs have like a drum beat or drum loops or whatever, because there's obviously lots of piano all throughout their catalog. And I think that's probably the thing. I like it more when he plays piano, I would maybe say, than the guitar, though that's not true. But like I like so few people in a band can play classical piano though.
Yes,
like I've always my favorite Muse song is Butterflies and Hurricanes until you make it feel like it's Halloween, or you make me feel like it's Halloween. But I love Butterflies and Hurricanes because there's the whole bridge of the song is just this crazy, sweeping, classic, very complicated, complex, classical piano piece. And I love it. And it's so different from anything you'll hear in any band ever.
Yeah.
And so to get a song that's just that, and it is complex. It is classical, complex piano composition. And I even like the chorus and everything, but I feel like that's probably, to me, the weakest song on the album. Even weaker than the last song, which that's the We Are Effing Effed, I'll say. Like, that song, to me, when I first heard that, I was like, I think they recorded this live in the studio. I think that they literally recorded this live in the studio, which is insane that you could have a song that was recorded live in the studio and have it at the same level of quality as what is, in my opinion, the best sounding album I've ever heard. Like, that is insane. And it totally sounds fantastic. There's obviously overdubs with the vocals and things on that song. So there are things they added to it. But the way the guitar, the drums, and the bass sound on that song, I think that they recorded it live in the studio. I would be shocked if I was wrong. But if we just go through this, like the moment the album started and I got Beautiful People, I was like, what on earth? And then for a second, I was like, did I misread that interview with him and they just wanted to recreate singles by other people? Like, is every one of these songs going to be like based? Because the other song I had heard before that was Won't Stand Down, which is so clearly Sail by AWOL Nation. It is so obviously that exact thing, which is awesome. It's so cool. Yeah. Now you and I have talked. One of the songs, I think it is "Won't Stand Down." Like the only negative thing I can say about the album is that there's one chorus on one of the songs, and I think it's "Won't Stand Down" because it's been a little while since I listened to this, where the guitars feel big and heavy and chunky, which like the heavy guitars on this album sound so heavy but so crisp and clean and so well recorded. There's a moment in one of the songs, and I think it's "Won't Stand Down," where when it gets to the chorus, some of that, like the bigness is taken out, and it feels like the chorus is smaller than the pre-chorus and the like post-chorus.
I think that's Kill or Be Killed, actually.
It could be. It's one of those two, because those are the two sort of like heavier ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, it might be Kill or Be Killed. But even still, I love that song. I love Kill or Be Killed. Oh, yeah.
It has a really weird sound to it for that reason, but the song itself is fantastic.
But even still, the opening riff, that like, like you think that it's going to go, and it never does. Like it builds, and then they kind of just go with the snare drum, like on the 1, 2, 3. Like they totally subvert your expectations so that when they do get to the chorus of that song and they're like, we're gonna break it down, and you're like, what am I listening to? And then in the background Matt Bellamy goes, and it's like super slow. You're like, what is this? But even before we get to that, like I think Compliance is so cool. It sounds like a Michael Jackson song, I would say. Like it's so cool with the like da 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 da, 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 like synths. It's like someone playing synths, like actual chords on a synth, which I want you to pay attention to this, Chris, throughout the next year. Okay. I want you to notice when you hear synths on a record, if it sounds like someone's playing a part or if it just sounds like someone was like with the mouse and keyboard, the way I would do it if I was writing a song, just like programming it in, or if it's just like synth pads. What are the synths actually doing? And I want you to count the moments where you can hear someone playing a synth. Okay. Because I'll bet it is so few and far between. Now that might be harder to do, but like to me, if a synth part is doing a chord, that is so rare. So rare to hear a chord in a synth. And we get stuff like that all over the place because they're in the studio playing these parts. It just sounds so fantastic. Liberation, I think, is great. That's the one that to me is like a Queen song. That's where they have the crazy vocals, the crazy secondary third vocal part. Verona is fantastic. Verona is the one I think that is or is that Euphoria, the synth part? That's just the building, the dee doo 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 dee doo 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 dee doo 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 dee doo doo doo, and then the guitar part is like I can't remember which one of those two, whether that's Verona or Euphoria. I think it's Verona as well. Euphoria is Euphoria.
Yeah, that's Verona.
Euphoria is Yes, Verona. That I was going to tell you this, but then I thought I shouldn't tell you this because I think you're going to hate it. This song is so obviously about Twilight because so much of Muse's career and popularity came from Twilight, and I know a lot of people don't want to like admit that, but it is absolutely true. For like 5 years, Twilight was the biggest thing in the world. And Stephenie Meyer at the end of every Twilight book and at the end of every Twilight movie said, "Thank you, Muse, for being my biggest inspiration." Like that's why every Twilight movie has a Muse song in it. They wrote 3 songs specifically just for Twilight. Verona is their, you want us to write our big singles again? Here's our Twilight song in 2022. So that is what Verona is. But the cool thing about it too, though, is like it could also be interpreted to be about coronavirus. So it's Verona, but it also could be Corona because it talks about poison and all these different things. And just two people who can't and shouldn't be together. You could take it to mean, Josh, I wasn't expecting to break down lyrics in this video, so I'm not even. But like,
I was going to say, it feels a little bit like working backwards.
Yeah, you could clearly take it to mean Twilight, or you could clearly take it to mean COVID. But I think that same could maybe be true for a lot. There's a lot of really interesting political things on the album, which I don't care about at all.
Classic
who really
Muse,
cares? Yeah, who cares about the lyrics anyway? I love this album. You tell me what you think about it.
Oh, you want me to tell you my part of it?
Well, just what do you think about it? Or are you going to have it on your... Oh, wait, you'll probably have it on the list later.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. In that case, then we'll save it, and we'll talk more about this album later.
Number 9 for me is Will of the People by Muse. No, that's not true. It is Profound Mysteries by Röyksopp, which is a 3-album series.
I was going to say, I know Röyksopp released 2 albums this year because I listened to 2 of them, but I didn't know there was a third one.
Yes.
Or I listened to part of one of them, I should say, and then I was like, nah, I don't care about this.
And they do technically count as 3 different albums because they came out 3 different times throughout the year. You know, beginning of the year, middle, and late.
Yeah.
But they do all have the same name and a number after it.
That's a trilogy to me.
So I said Profound Mysteries as a whole.
Yep, I would agree.
For number 9. And I did also just recently learn, I haven't seen any of them, but every song, all 30 songs, have a corresponding short film. And
Insane.
How have they done this? Their last album they put out, Inevitable End, came out I think 2018, and they said that it was going to be their last LP. And I did not know what that meant because I was like, oh, well, then they're done making music and life is worse now. And then they just started putting out albums, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I don't know what that means. But I was doing some reading about it to figure out what the hell that actually means. And it was like, they didn't want to be confined to the LP structure so specifically anymore. So they're doing a lot of weird conceptual stuff. Sometimes they'll put out just a song, and then there's stuff like this, which is 3 separate albums. And if you ask me, what the hell's the difference? But either way, each album is 10 songs. One's 50 minutes, and they're almost all exactly the same. Like 51 minutes, 51 minutes, 30 seconds, 51 minutes, 2 seconds, and then one full straight direct hour, just 60 minutes flat.
Okay.
And I have always loved Röyksopp. I consider them to be one of the bands that is, where it's like, they don't really make bad music. Everything they do is fantastic. They have such a specific sound with the way that their synths are constructed, and there are a couple of different featured artists that they use over and over again, specifically Suzanne Sundfør, I think is her name. They've used her a lot, to the point where I have investigated her to see what else she's done, Suzanne Sundfør. And everything that she does outside of them is garbage. And, and it's like, I don't know, it's just, yeah, it's just her vocals, which are wonderful, in a type of music that does not do anything for me at all. And they figure out, I don't know what it takes. I don't understand how, from the music writing perspective, how they're like, okay, well, if you do songs for us, they're all going to be fantastic. And it's always the case. Some of my favorite songs by them involve her. And then there's another one, Alison Goldfrapp, I think she's worked with them once or twice before, but her songs are great. And they're just, I don't know, there's a lot of, what do you say? I mean, you know Röyksopp, like, what do you say about them?
Well, for me, trying to listen to the album, I saw that there was 2, and I felt a little overwhelmed. And so I was like, I don't know how deep I want to get into this. And I just started listening to it, and I noticed, like, a bunch of variety right away.
Yep.
So, like, the first, like, I think I listened to, I didn't know there was a 3rd album, so I must have caught it between 2nd and 3rd. So I'm not sure when the 3rd one came out, but...
The 3rd one came out, it was not very long ago.
So I must have caught them between 1st and 2nd. And
November 18th,
yeah. So what I would have listened to would have been the first one, and it would have been probably just like the first 5 songs from the first one. And I remember thinking, like, I really liked some of what I was hearing, and then some of what I was hearing I didn't care for as much. Maybe I thought it was like a little bit, I didn't have as much, like, there wasn't as much there as I wanted there to be, maybe. But other than that, like, I really didn't listen to this enough to justify it. Like, probably if I listened to all 30 songs, I would be like, all 30 songs equals something that definitely should be on my list. You know, because 30 songs is a lot.
That's a lot.
And if you enjoy half of every song, you still have 15.
Yeah, you still got a
full album. So I don't know what to say. Like, it's an interesting style of electronic music that, like, incorporates. I feel like they try to incorporate, like, with the stuff I heard, at least, like, they try to make it sound, at least on this stuff, because I don't really know any of their older music.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They try to make it more like their drums sound sort of like rock drums, right? and then they use cool synths and stuff around that, which is an interesting thing. But that could be totally changed from album to album or song. Like I guess I can speak with no authority.
Sure, and I wasn't sure. I didn't realize you hadn't heard any of the stuff before that.
Yeah,
but
no.
There is something fundamentally edgeless about every single thing that they do from a sonic perspective. It's just so soft and round. I think you would probably classify as warm per our conversation about the two of those things. But they also have like there's this certain drive that goes into a lot of the music. Sometimes when they do their ballads, their slower songs, some of them are so soft and slow. It's like, am I even listening to this still? Like, is it silence and I'm making it up? Like,
Yep.
But like, there's a new song off of Profound Mysteries 3 specifically called Speed King. It's almost 10 minutes long. And it has this really great, like, it starts off kind of, just given the name of the song, it has this evocation of like a single car in a city somewhere like Japan, and it's like 1 a.m. and it's just out cruising around and there's nothing. It's just like the lights but no other people and stuff like that. And then it just builds and it just keeps building. It has a very infected mushroom structure to the way that it just keeps adding stuff to itself and getting bigger and bigger throughout the course of the song. And it might be one of it. I could possibly say it's my favorite song of theirs, except that 10 minutes is a little bit beefy in terms of like digestibility on a standard regular, like, I'm not going to just put a 10-minute song into my rotation and call it my favorite song. Like, that takes a lot of work, but
you have to be in the mood for that.
Right. But if it came on and I wasn't in any kind of real hurry to hear something happen, it would get about halfway through and I'd be like, oh yeah, this is that song. This is so good. And like, I consider their 2009 album Junior to be perfect album. It's just every single song flawless, all listenable, all different. They're just one of those bands that's always going to put out. I could recommend them, and it's like, what album should I start with? Which song should I start with? And I'll go, pick one. Just go.
Yeah, and there's not too many bands that you can do that with.
Right, for sure.
That's a special band, for sure. Okay. All right. Well, that definitely, like, I need to listen to them more. Like, now that we're done with all of this, and I'm like the pressure of creating my list, which is incredible pressure to me for the last like 2 months, just like insane, but I love it so much. But now that we're done with this, and I can finally go back and listen to some of the stuff that came out like last year that I discovered over the course of this year, and some new bands that I discovered this year that I had never heard of before that have like 3, 4, 5 albums that have come out before I heard of them. Now I'm really excited to go do stuff like that. I will add Roixop to that list of like, I need to listen to this more, like these 3 albums more, and just see how I feel about it. Cause I'll bet I would like it more than I probably gave it credit for at the time. Okay. So interestingly enough, my 8th, are we on 8? Yeah. My 8th album is going to be something that is actually pretty similar to what you were just talking about. And this is one of the albums that I know, or at least I'm fairly certain, if you had listened to this album, I think it would have made it onto your list. And I know I mentioned it at least once, if not twice, throughout the year, but either you ignored me or you did listen to it, and you'll prove me wrong here in a second.
Can't wait.
This is A Call to Arms and Angels by Archive.
Oh, nope. I didn't listen to that.
Okay.
I should have.
Yeah, you should have. But I'll tell you why, but that's fine. That's totally cool. So the cool thing about this is I have this, as you can see, autographs here by the band, which is really cool. Did not know that I purchased that when I bought this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I bought the deluxe edition, so that came with a third bonus disc, because it's a double album, and it came with a third disc of what I didn't even know at the time really what it was, but it was another disc, and I was like, okay, I'll take that for $30 or whatever, as opposed to the regular album for 20 or whatever. So I was like, okay. And when it came in the mail, autographed, had no clue.
Beautiful.
And this is like legit autograph too. Not that
I was going to say, can you tell if they're real?
Oh, it's real. Oh, it's real.
Nice.
You can tell for sure that it's real. And it's cool because they actually added a new member to their band this album, which is cool. So they now have 3 women that sing for them.
Cool.
and then the 4 guys that are like the core archive. So the cool thing about this, let's discuss length real quick here. So if you just went to the store, which good luck finding a store that you could buy this at, and bought the regular edition of this album, it is 17 songs coming in at a total of 1 hour and 43 minutes, or 103 minutes.
Nice.
So by far the longest album on my list at 103 minutes. But the cool thing is, this is the deluxe edition, and I'm including all of this as one thing because I bought this in one package. This is a one thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's 3 discs. The third disc has 10 songs at a total of 42 minutes. So all total, all 3 discs are 2 hours and 25 minutes long, or 145 minutes. So the interesting thing about this is, first of all, how fantastic this album is, because you and I have talked about Archive for many years now. Mm-hmm. And this is definitely a band. Like, one of the things I wanted to do with this video, and I haven't been doing it so far, is like, is this album something that I would recommend to people in general, or is this more of like a specific thing, like more of a niche thing? Archive is definitely more of a niche thing. Like, I do not think that the average person would have the patience for listening to an Archive album, especially their last like 4 or 5 albums. However, one really cool thing about this album is every single one of the 17 songs I'm just going to talk about the regular edition for now, and then I'll just very briefly mention what the third disc is. So on the regular edition of the 17 songs, for the first time that I'm aware, every single song on this album has vocals in it. That is not something that I could say.
That's not something that's happened, yeah.
That is not something that you could say for Archive. In fact, their last 4 albums, a majority of the album has been instrumental. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that is like a bit of a bummer. And they do, like, a False Foundation, which is their album from 2 albums ago. They do actually have a lot of vocals. I think that album is mostly vocals. But then they released Axiom the same year as Restriction. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But this album is, I would say, on one hand, the most accessible album they've ever done, because every song has vocals, and a majority of the songs are manageable length. I should have looked this up, but I believe there are 4 songs over 10 minutes long. I think there's one song that's 17 minutes. I think there's one that's 13, and one that's 10 something, and then there's maybe one that's 9 something. But that's what you get with Archive. Like, it is so hard to like explain to people what Archive is, because I think the simplest way to explain it is like repeating patterns is like what they do. Like repeating patterns, kind of
the
like
Chemical Brothers are really good for that too.
Yes, for sure. That
recently.
But I do think that, like, I've never enjoyed the Chemical Brothers that much. To me, they're too 90s, and maybe I haven't heard any of their more recent stuff, but like, I just know from that one video with the train that was on MTV all the time. It's just like a train. It's like the same exact thing for like 5 minutes, and it was really boring. But I mean, there is that for sure. They can do it to a fault for sure. Right. But again, who am I to say or complain about that at all, having this album in my hand? Yeah. But like, the cool thing about this album is it's circular, which is really neat. So like, the album starts and there is a rock song. Like, the first track is not a rock track, but the first track's like 3 minutes long, and then the second track is like 10 minutes long or whatever. And that is like a rock track where everything builds. They are the rock band. Like, the drums that you're hearing are the drums that someone was playing. And then the album goes for like an hour, and you don't actually hear the band come back until the last song, really, on the second disc, which is really cool, I think. One other thing I would say about Archive for people who don't know is that, like, Archive is one of the only bands that I consider their music to be art. And I say that in the best way possible. Like, I really consider their music to be art. I've said it before when I've talked about them a million times. I really think in order to appreciate them and this album, you have to listen to it in order. You have to listen to it in one sitting, which I know is tough. It's very long. I did it for a reaction on my channel, and I think it's actually the best reaction I've ever done. And then I got really disappointed because I couldn't use the music. So I think that video has like 25 views on it. And I don't blame anyone for sitting there and watching me listen to music for 2 hours. But, so like, I don't blame anyone for that. But the clarity of everything on this album is amazing. It is the best produced album Archive has ever made. If you enjoy piano playing, this album is for you. There is so much fantastic piano playing. The songs that are long, like you never know when you're listening to an archive album, there could be like 4 words listed in the booklet for the song you're on. That could be the song that's 14 minutes long. Like you have no clue. There's no context when you start listening to an archive song. You have no clue how long it's going to last. The cool thing about this album is, Chris, the archive songs that you like Black and Blue and Hatchet, and
Hatchet's good.
All the songs that have like the women vocalist, really, because there's many different vocalists for archive, and there have been many over the years. But that lady who sings on those 2 songs I mentioned, Black and Blue and Hatchet, her name is Jen. She is a part of the band. And there's 2 other ladies that also, there's a lady named Holly and then another newer lady, I believe, whose name I'm very sorry I forgot, and I'm not going to take the time to look it up. But all 3 women have completely different, like, unique voices. But the cool thing is, this, of the 17 tracks on here, I would say 13 of them are just like Black and Blue or Hatchet. Like it's female-led vocals with a really cool drum beat, really neat little blips and bloops, cool synth pad stuff in the background. Songs build, nice choruses, backing vocals, very chill, but also at times very unsettling, very dark. But also happy, hopeful feeling as well. Like there's so much that goes along with an archive album. And I really do think this is their second best album they've ever made. The album that I think is better than this is Controlling Crowds Part 1 through 3, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. And an album that I like hold in extremely high regard. I don't know if they could make an album to me that's as good as that album, but this is probably as close as they'll ever get. So it's so great. It's very consistent. I will say having the second track on the first album be Mr. Daisy, which is that rock song I was mentioning, that is significantly like lower sonic quality than the rest of the album.
Interesting.
However, it's the band playing as a band, and you can kind of forgive it because it's almost like they're doing it on purpose. Like the band stuff feels very live, and it is incredibly intentional. Like they intentionally have the vocals doing specific things on those songs where you're getting the real drums and the band sound. So those are my least favorite songs on this album. But like the whole second disc, Chris, I think you would enjoy the entire second disc.
What song does that start on? 8?
It starts on Every Single Day.
Okay.
Or no. Freedom. Sorry. The first disc has 9 tracks on it. The second disc only has 8. So Freedom. Okay. But the coolest thing about that song, Freedom has the quietest vocals I've ever heard performed. Like, I could do this for every one of these songs, but Freedom specifically, like the thing that's coolest about that song is the lady that sings, there's a moment in the song where she's singing quieter than I've ever heard a singer sing before. Like she is singing at the absolute limit that a person could sing quiet-wise. Like she is singing.
Interesting.
Like that's literally, it's insane that she can hold notes as low as she's doing it.
Like that Fine Frenzy album.
Yes, but this goes so far beyond that. It's like insane that this is possible for a human being to do. And then the next track, the male vocalist is like, I can beat that. I can sing quieter than that. And so he does it. He tried. It's insane how big these songs can get. There'll just be like 12 vocal harmonies all of a sudden. It's so well crafted as a piece of art. Like I said, like you'll be listening and then all of a sudden something will like attack you, and it's intentional. Like it's supposed to be like a jump scare in a movie, and it's so well done. The last 2 tracks, The Crown and Gold, are so unsettling. Like The Crown does a thing that Archive has done in the past where they just pick like a phrase and they just repeat it over and over. And for that, it's just this one, their new singer going, the crown, the crown, the crown, the crown. And then all these other creepy things come in on the sides and they fly around. And it's so amazing from like an audiophile perspective. And it just is creepy. And it has this weird beat and rhythm to it that's unsettling. So awesome. All of the songs on this album are so good. It's fantastic. It really is so good. Honestly, like, I wish I could force people to sit in a room with me and listen to Archive. It's fantastic. So just real quick, the third disc is the soundtrack to the documentary that they made about the making of this album. So they made a documentary about the making of this album during COVID. This is 100,000% a COVID album. Almost every song is about COVID or some political thing dealing with COVID, which is really interesting, cool. They're from England, so it's English politics. So I feel like I can be like, okay, you're not happy with Brexit or whatever? Cool, I don't care about that, you know? You know what I mean? So like, you don't have to like worry about it. Not that you would worry about it. Who cares about the lyrics anyway? But so the third disc is the soundtrack to their movie Super 8. And I've actually watched the movie, even though it's very hard to get through. Do not recommend the movie to anybody unless you're like a Super Archive fan. But it is very much art house. There'll be like a whole 4-minute scene with just like you hear like static, and it's just like the whole movie's in black and white. It's very weird. However, there are really nice interview sections in it where they talk about making of this album, and they show them working on the album, and they talk to the new ladies, like to the new lady and all the different people. They talk about how they made the album. It's so cool and fascinating from that perspective. And the third disc in this is the soundtrack to that. It's all instrumental. It's all sort of like chill ambient music with like little drum patterns that fade in and out. Super chill, very good to listen to for background music. You could definitely listen to this for like when you're editing and stuff, or I think you could probably, I don't know, but that's Archive. I've talked too long about this one. Very excited about it. You should listen to it at some point.
I will.
That's my number 8.
Poking through it now while you were talking about it.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 10 is, to the surprise of everyone on Earth.
No, not number 10. We should be on your number 8.
You're right. My number 8.
Okay. Blew
my brains out. The first album in a decade by the Mars Volta.
Oh, I don't know anything about the Mars Volta. So.
Oh, really? They're one of my favorite. Yeah. They have this really weird, low key, like a band that at one point I couldn't stand because of all of their meandering and instrumental work and like 13-minute songs of
just like Archive,
just kind of everywhere. But at some point, a switch was flipped, and I was like, oh wait. I love this so very, very much.
I love that.
And I don't know what happened. It happened with Mars Volta, and it happened with Frasier and some other stupid crap in my life. But this album, okay, so they just, you wake up one morning, oh my, what is this Christmas that I've come across? A new song from the Mars Volta. I did not think this was possible. I had given up. It's like if I were to suddenly wake up one morning and saw a new song by the Cardigans, I would just have a crisis and fall down on the ground. And I listened to it and I was like, okay, well, it's 2 minutes and some change, so that's unfortunate. But what's there is great, and you can tell by the way that it ends that in album version it goes right into the next thing.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, well, whatever it is, maybe it'll wander off into some unknown land of jazz ghosts and whatever the hell. And I can't find it on this list now, and I'm really annoyed by that. All right, yeah, first song, Black Light Shine, is 2:55. It's like, all right, well, that's fine. And then the album came out, and I was like, all right, here we go. And it's like, okay, first song, good. Second song, excellent. Next 5 songs, ballads.
Oh.
Okay. And they're just, I don't know, man. The Mars Volta has such a specific, like, the things that I love about them are that, first of all, the energy is always crazy high. It's usually very, very dark, like thematically super dark. And it's, especially, my favorite Mars Volta album is Francis the Mute, which, it's weird because it's like, there are times, I will always forget about them. But if I ever come across a reason to talk about them or hear a thing, it's like, all right, well, that's it. 2 straight weeks of nothing but Mars Volta. Like, that's just, it always happens like that.
Sure.
And, which is one of the reasons that now, that according to Spotify, they are my number 1 most listened to band of the year.
Really? Okay.
A new album came out, and I listened to it 1,000 times, and then by virtue of that, listened to all of the rest of their stuff 1,000 times.
Sure.
But I'm telling you, man, it is 14 songs, 44 minutes, and they usually knock that out with like 4 songs. Like, and so it's like, this is the first time that they've ever had such a breakdown of like, here's just a bunch of songs. Here's a song, here's a song. It's very, very traditional. It's very poppy in its presentation. And
does each song feel like a complete song, or do they feel like they could go into each other?
They all seem, for the most, there's a couple that go into each other, but for the most part, they seem to be pretty standalone. And it's not my favorite work by them. I would say it's a little bit of a disappointment, but only based on the unbelievable expectations of not making an album for 10 years and having everything that they've made before be so incredibly wild.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, oh my God, it's happening. And then they toured again and they were in town and I missed it because it sold out immediately and it was very expensive and all this other stuff. So it's like, well, I'm glad that they're back. Hopefully they've got another album coming. I'm going to make it to one of their shows. It's like, it's been a bucket list item of mine where it's like, well, if Mars Volta ever gets it together, I will see them at all costs. And
have you never seen them before then?
No, I don't think I became a fan of theirs until after they'd stopped making music. Because I had listened to them before that, and that was when I was in that, like, what is this mess mode about them. And so that's always been a huge bummer. But it's on my list because the first two songs and a couple of the songs towards the end of the album are really fantastic and remind me of what they do best. I'm thrilled that they are able to take advantage of new recording and production techniques. Because it's always like, oh, here's a band. The last time they made an album was 2012. This sounds so much better than everything else they've ever done. Mm-hmm. Really, really good stuff. And with all of the multi-instrumentalists and like the chaos and how complex everything they do is, it's like if I could listen to a Cygnus via Cygnus from Francis the Mute with brand new production, it would be incredible. Mm-hmm. It would be completely out of control. And so it's like, it's on my list. Almost entirely because Mars Volta is back. And that is such an exciting prospect.
That's cool, though.
If it was just another album by them, you know, they've been making music this whole time, it probably wouldn't make the list because it is just so slow. And the middle is just such a ballady kind of like, come on, give me something to hold on to here. I don't need to, and it just sounds so saccharine and like, this is about love and I don't care. But I don't know. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that they're back. It's not without merit, but I would love to see them get a little bit more back to their actual style with whatever they do after this.
So do you think that maybe they got this out of their system and touring live again will like give them the energy to make a more chaotic album?
That's such a good question. And I don't know, because I know a couple of people who did get to see them live on their recent tour for this album. They're like, beyond belief, they've still got it. Like they're in their 40s or whatever, getting close to beyond that, and they've still got it. They're playing all the hits, which is really good to hear. And I would like to think that they'll, you know, I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to all of it.
Okay. All right, so that means we're on to my last one for this video. And this is kind of the toughest one to talk about, not the least of which is because I can't pronounce what it's called at all. So this is I Mila Oli Kuin Loiseme, or something like that, by Vili Lihala and Sadajat.
Oh. Are they from Utah?
Good old. Yeah, they're from Kansas. So this is an album that I found totally on accident because, so quick history with how I found this and why I like this album so much. This is definitely one that like is for me. This is like a for me one. This is a personal thing. I don't even know who I would really recommend this to, but if I explain it a little bit and it sounds interesting to you, please give it a listen. But so there was a metal band from Finland that I really enjoyed called Sentenced. And they were a band that they were the first metal band I ever heard and got into that had no screaming or harsh vocals at all.
Oh, nice.
And they played music that they referred to as funeral metal.
Interesting.
And
interesting description.
Right. And it's very gothic. Like the aesthetic of the band was very much, to me, I always associate it with Series of Unfortunate Events because it's so like downtrodden, and like they would even say like, don't listen to our music. It sucks. Like, you do not want to listen to our music. It's depressing as hell. Just don't listen to it. Go to a happy concert instead. Like, that is the vibe that they gave off. And they have a couple of really big songs, like Killing You, Killing Me was like their big song. And then they had a song called Cross My Heart and Hope to Die. And they were just a cool band that I really liked. Their production was always terrible. Like, their last album came out in 2005, I think.
Okay.
And it sounds like it's their best sounding album, but it is so woofy and low endy that the sonic quality of it was not what I wanted. But at the time when I heard it in high school, that didn't matter to me at all. And, you know, going back and listening to their older, like, they started as like a crazy like blast beat deathcore thing band from like the early 90s, and then they turned into this gothic band. And I really enjoyed Sentenced. Well, so then Sentenced broke up. They had a final album. They knew it was going to be their final album. It's called the Funeral Album. They did a last tour called the Funeral Tour. They recorded it and released it on a live DVD that's called like the Funeral DVD or something like that. You know, Buried Alive or something like that. Sticking with their theme. And so they were no longer a band. And the singer went and joined another band that had already existed for one album called Poison Black, also from Finland. And I bought the album that he sang on, his first album, and I thought, this sounds just like Sentenced, but with way better production. I'm totally there. And then they released their third album, but their second album with the singer Vili Lahala as their singer. They released their second album with him. And it was so clearly like we're going to go break into the American market. We're going to have this album sound like an American rock album. And we're going to, like, you know, take our pictures in Las Vegas and have like the American flag on our shirts and stuff. And I heard it and I hated it. I hated that album. And that album, which I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but that album is, to me, the album that I have changed my opinion on more than any other album. I went back years later and fell in love with that album. The production is unlike any other album I've ever heard. It's so raw, but so well performed, but like it's so well recorded, in my opinion. And so then I fell in love with the band Poison Black, and then they released 3 more albums, all of which are fantastic, and I love them so much. Then they broke up. Then the singer started a new band, and that Poison Black always had the same mentality of like, we suck, don't listen to our music, it's all downtrodden, it's all about funerals and suicides and depressing stuff and all this other thing, and I love every second of it. But the cool thing that was different about Poison Black than Sentenced was they would have these really cool solo sections, and their songs were longer and they were much more bluesy. So keep that in mind. Then they broke up, and the singer started his own band called Stool. S-T-O-O-L. And it was a continuation of what Poison Black was doing, except they didn't do the slower, more bluesy songs. It was just like metal, very like rocking, like metal, with his very signature style of vocals that he has done all these many years. And they released 2 albums over the last 4 years. And their last album was 2 years ago. And so I was thinking earlier this year, I was like, I wonder if S-Tool has like a new album this year. And I looked, no, nothing. And so I went to Spotify and I typed in his name, Vili Lahala, which I know it's spelled really weird. It's like L-A-I-L-I-A something. Like there's like a weird thing in there. No offense to his name.
Of course, yes.
But that like week, it was so lucky. Very soon after I searched for him, or right before I had searched for him, he released this album. And apparently it's his first solo project, and it's by Vili Lahala and Satajat. And I had no idea what Satajat was or who that was or anything. And so I actually contacted a person that I know in Finland through like this other Facebook group that I have. And I was like, hey, can you look into this? Because I could find no interviews. I could find nothing about this album at all other than it existed on the internet. And there was like a music video for it. And in the credits of the music video, there were like the members of the band listed, and Satajat wasn't part of it. I was like, I don't know who this guy is. And so this guy from Finland looked into it for me, and he was like, I have no clue. I have no clue what Satajat means or anything at all. And he told me that it means a specific word in Finnish, and I don't remember what it was. I'm sorry. And And so I was like, okay, I have no clue about this album. All I can tell you is that it's one of the best things this man has ever put out. It is so fantastic. It is the perfect culmination of everything he has done in his career up to this point. I have not a clue what any single word on this album is because it's entirely in Finnish. It's the first album I've ever heard that's all in Finnish. I've only heard a few Nightwish songs that were in Finnish, but those are just individual songs.
Yeah.
I feel like his voice fits Finnish so well. It doesn't matter to me, obviously, that I don't care what they're saying. I think it's perfect. The production on this album, I think, might be the best produced thing he's ever put out. It has this perfect combination of like everything feels so raw. And I know I say raw, and that could mean like several things to different people, but it just feels like you're listening to someone performing live if it sounded great live and completely quiet. Like, there's background vocals that he does himself. It's perfect. Like you can tell the whole album was very cheap and like made simply, but it sounds fantastic. Are you listening to it right now?
No, I found I don't know how to look it up.
Yeah,
I know what you said.
Yeah, here I'll put his name in our Facebook thing so you can look up his name.
Okay, I sent you a picture of what I typed it up as in my notes.
Is that what that was? Is that what that is? Yes, pretty much. When you see the title of the album, when you type his name into Spotify, it'll be the thing that comes up. It's like a picture of like a bald dude with like a mustache type thing.
Yeah.
I just love this. It's so close to being rock, what I would consider to be like heavy rock music, but it's clearly metal. There's some good guitar solos, but that's not the focal point of the album. Whereas like I feel like some of the Poison Black stuff was the focus on the guitar solos. It's got high energy. There's one song in the middle of the album that is just piano and him singing, and then like very clearly like fake strings, and like a cool little drum beat thing thrown in. But I love it. I like every song on this album. I like it so much. There are 9 songs. It's 32 minutes, so it's not very long. But there's only 9 songs, and every song is a full song. I did look up, the translation is all we have is our parasites. That's the El Millier Ole Kuin Loi Seme. That's what that means. And that's just literal Google Translate. So it probably means like parasites is all we have or something like that. But
I mean, I think I hope it's word for word. That's a great title. All we have
is our parasites. Absolutely. 100%. So yeah, like I said, I knew nothing about this album, and so that was why I reached out to this guy that I know from Finland, and I was like, hey, can you just find, like, was this album received big? Like, can you go to a store and buy it? Did anyone care about it? And he said that from what he could find on like Finnish internet and stuff, and just like asking around with his other metalhead friends, people knew about it. They were aware. He is a pretty big deal in Finland. And the album was received pretty well, but it was really only released like locally in Finland. So it's just purely coincidence and luck that I happened to type his name into Spotify and this album came up. It's just, I don't know. I could see why it's almost weird that I like this as much as I do, because I always talk about how I don't like music that's just guitar, bass, drums, vocals. And that's really all this is. I just love every guitar riff. I love every bass part. I love every drum part. I love every vocal part. And that's just what it is. I like every part of every one of the songs.
And I'm listening to it now, and it's like, the music's great, and the vocals are definitely something that you would absolutely love.
His voice is so such an acquired taste.
Yes.
And that's how he sings for 20 years in bands.
I have, my love of Firewater means I'm not allowed to say anything about anybody's vocals in that regard. And I totally understand. But if I were to really get into this, that would be the highest hurdle to jump over, is how acquired taste his vocals are. Because the music's great.
Yeah. And that music is basically the music he's been making over the last like 7 albums with these different projects that he's had. And I feel like the production is very close to what he was doing with Poison Black and Stool. Stool, though, was like, there's a few songs on this album that are like faster and a little bit more driven. That's what Stool just was. It was like the last 2 Stool albums were just 10 songs. Every song was very fast. It's like music you should listen to when you're driving a car very fast. Like that's like what they do in the music videos. Like, I think that's kind of the vibe they're going for. It is definitely like, I feel like they're reaching they're trying to get like an aesthetic of something that I don't like, which is like generic American like bar rock music.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But there's like a darkness to it, and there's like a twisted sense of humor and like of sarcasm. Like, who names their band Stool? You know,
Yeah.
like, he's definitely going for like the poop end of like what stool means, and not like that's so a Vili Laihala thing. Like, to name a band Stool, like that is such a him and his vibe thing. I have a live Dead Heavy Day is the name of their album that I from Poison Black that I recommend people look up. But I have the deluxe edition that came with a bonus like concert DVD, and in the DVD they're just like doing stuff acoustically, and he just sits there and he's just like, this sucks so bad, like we're so terrible, and then they'll play this incredibly beautiful and intricate song flawlessly and it sounds amazing, and then he's like, I'm so sorry for that terrible performance, you know, like it's just like this like sad sack like constant. Like, I love that. That's, like I said, that's one of my favorite things about Series of Unfortunate Events. Like, every book starts with like, don't read this book, you know, don't go read Harry Potter or something instead. And so I love the aesthetic, I love everything about it, and even though it's short, I'm satisfied when the album is over. And because of the combination of the vocals that I love that they're in Finnish, like he does all these cool vocal things in Finnish that he doesn't necessarily do in English. There's lots of like like type of things, and it really works well. And I just love every aspect of it. So
there's the guy the creator of the Dark Souls series, it has a lot of that where he's just like, thank you so much for enjoying this garbage that I have made for you. like some people have compared Elden Ring to like Breath of the Wild, and he's like, oh, it's such an honor to have such filth compared to one of the greatest games of all time. And it's like you've made a game that changed the entire world in irreplaceable ways, and it's like, oh, but my trash, my poor useless waste of time.
I love that. See, I love that. I love that aesthetic, like that vibe. I totally love it. So,
and it's funny
100%.
Actually, because all of the games sort of, they have this like this hopelessness within them, where it's like, this is just, everything here is so sad and dark and hopeless, and it's always running around through the broken ashes of something that used to be a thing, but now it's just so dark and miserable and filthy every time. And it's just, that's funny that those two things go hand in hand that way.
Love the aesthetic, 100%.
So, number 7 is, let me turn off Vili here so that I can think, is Non-Negative by Coldrain, which is the album. It is a Japanese metalcore, I suppose, band. This is the band that was in contention against Survive Said the Prophet for which Japanese metalcore band is going to be the one on my list.
Okay. I just had assumed when you said that you meant that the other album didn't make it on your list. So that was why I brought up what I did when you said that. So, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, Survive Said the Prophet didn't make the list because Coldrain did. Okay. Effectively. And Coldrain had an album come out. Their last album was The Effect, I think, 2019. And their big song off of it was a song called Mayday, which is really, really great. But they've stepped it up even more in this album, where it's like, this is the heaviest music that they've made. And one song in particular is like, well, this is just hands down. And it's not, but it's interesting because it doesn't, Survive Said the Prophet also is in this category of what I'm about to say, but it does not match any of what we talked about Japanese bands sounding like on the other stuff. This is so much more traditional in its execution, where you would probably not know that they were Japanese unless you looked it up.
Okay.
Even though, I will say, vocally, he does have some, like, this doesn't sound like New Mexico, you know? Like, this guy sounds kind of funky.
Okay.
In a way that seems to be weirdly specific to Japanese bands, and in ways that I'm not entirely sure how to express. But they have a song on here called Cut Me, actually, that is just that pure, that wonderful, like, emo metalcore bliss.
Yep.
But it doesn't have, I think a lot of the stuff that you dislike the most about this type of music isn't quite here in the Japanese form. Like, they're not bringing that sort of, like what you talked about earlier, where like really heavy stuff followed by the
Whoa.
Yeah, it's not really. They don't really do that as much.
Okay.
And they're just, I don't know. They're another one of those bands where it's like I don't really think about it very often, but then I'll come up. Oh yeah, Coldrain fired up. Yeah, this is good.
Do they have keyboards?
Good. Let's see.
If you have to think about it, they probably don't. So that's kind of cool. Different.
Yeah, they don't. It's very like guitar, bass, drums, vocals.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of regular like clean sung vocals, but with like bursts of screaming and stuff like that.
Okay.
And a lot of positivity in their music too. It's very upbeat in terms of like what he's singing about. And
do you want me to look it up, or do you want to
sounds.
wait and then do like a little bit of a reaction thing?
I mean, if you want to listen to something now, I'm into it.
Okay, I'll look.
And they do have a song specifically called 2020, so I would call this probably a COVID album if I had to guess.
Okay. Is that the song you want me to look up?
No, listen to Cut Me. I like that song quite a bit.
Okay. Coldrain, you said. That's the name of the band, Coldrain.
Coldrain, yeah, one word.
My Spotify's not working. Hold on. Keep talking.
I don't have anything to say.
Okay, I'm hitting play.
Excellent.
Okay. A lot of dissonance.
Yep.
Ooh, I love in this song in particular, I hear like a little whammy guitar thing, like a wah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it sound Japanese to you, vocally?
I don't think I would know that it was
Awesome.
Japanese.
Yeah. What is your problem?
It's not as bad as it could be.
You're right.
I really like all the like shouting vocals. During the verse, it was really cool, like with the like harsh with the call and response.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I love the guitars. The riff is really cool too. And yeah, I've heard nothing but guitar, bass, drums, vocals.
Yeah.
Some cool drum. I'm in like verse 2 now. Some cool drum programming there, drum looping stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm recording this, so people won't be able to hear what I'm hearing, but it's interesting to hear. Okay, I'm going to call that good.
Yeah, you can sync it up if you wanted to. But...
And then like a speaking part. Distorted vocals too at the beginning, and then now I was just getting into the bridge when I stopped it. I did stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I love it. And then it gets to the chorus. It's just...
yeah, the chorus just like changes into like major key, just like it's
very happy sounding.
Here comes positivity.
Not bad though. Like I'm probably
not bad, not a bad way at all. It's just
No.
like that seems very Japanese of them to like.
Well, then the fun
do
thing
whatever
about,
blah, 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 and then positivity.
and then happy, yeah. Well, the fun thing about that too, though, like if you have a song that's in C major, which is like the happiest key, you can still detune your guitars to C and play heavy, chunky riffs. You know, but you just can't tell that they're happy, like, or major because they're so low on the guitar. So the whole song could be in like a happy key. I don't think it is. It didn't sound that way.
I don't know anything about that. So
no, for sure. But I just mean like you're right. Like at the verse and the intro definitely sounded like I wouldn't say it was generic because I really liked the way the riff was done and everything, and I love the way the guitars and the drums, everything sounded. Because some music like that doesn't have good production like that. So so that was really nice. And then even when it got into the chorus with all the layering of the vocals was really nice. Like there's harmony vocals and stuff, and then the shouting vocals as well. Loved it.
Good stuff. Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, I would listen to an album of that. I don't think that's...
It was just such a
actually
nice...
The most different thing is the fact that there aren't keyboards and stuff flying all over that. So
right. It's the least Japanese thing that has come from a Japanese band that I would say.
Yeah.
Like...
For sure. All right. Well, that's the end of this video, and I don't see us... There's no need for us to like drag this out, right? We've already talked for way too long probably, so... Thank you very much for watching, and we are going to do part 2 in a couple days. I found out tomorrow whether or not I need surgery on my arm or not, so everybody who was watching this after the fact will know, because I'll tell you on Wednesday, but let's hope that I don't have to have surgery on my arm. But I'm really looking forward to the next part, Chris. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to talk about the next 6 albums.
I'm on board with that big time.
In my opinion,
my notes.
Everything we talked about today was great, and I had a hard time choosing that over any of the stuff in my honorable mentions. But from here on out, we are getting banger after banger after banger.
Yep, the fire's coming.
And I will say to people who was a little disappointed with all the metal in this video, because like all my stuff was pretty much metal, with the exception of Muse, and really just the exception of Muse. Stabbing Westward, I wouldn't necessarily call a metal band, but more like new metal, gothic electronic maybe. But next time we only have one metal band, and I don't even know if you could say the album that they released was a metal album.
Well, so I would say continue to be disappointed because I would think you would have more metal to come. 2, 3. I have 3 of the next.
Okay. I only have 1 though. So we're going to talk about majority not metal music next time, and that's totally cool.
That's true, yeah.
And I just cannot wait because I had like some albums that just like blew me away this year.
Same.
And I am so excited to talk about them. So look forward to that next time. We'll be with you. Probably we'll post both of these at the same time, so you can just go right over there. But for us, we got to wait 2 days and soak up all the goodness. So.
Oh, also, non-negative, 12 songs, 45 minutes.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right. Until next time.
See you in a minute.